Chapter 1. I woke up with a start, breathing fast. Sweat slicked my skin, and my heart hammered against my ribcage like it wanted out. The nightmare clung to me like a relentless echo of the past, my parents' faces twisted in horror, their voices cut short by an unseen force that had snatched them from this world 5 years ago. The images haunted me, blurring the lines between dream and memory, leaving a bitter taste of unresolved anguish. Geez, brain. Way to start the day with a bang. Or more like a whimper. At least my subconscious was consistent, serving up the same horror show on repeat. Bad one, huh? Agatha asked, slinking into my bedroom. The early morning light seeping in through the blinds streaked her black fur with bands of gold. Her green eyes held a depth that seemed almost human, and she jumped up onto the bed. Yeah, real bad, I said, raking a hand through my hair. Holy hell. Language, young witch. And, I'm sorry about your parents. Agatha was more than my familiar. She was a confidant, a fragment of sanity in my chaotic world. I reached out to scratch behind her ears, and she leaned into the touch, purring her approval. Right, the Echoing Locket. I slid my legs over the edge of the bed. The power of the amulet was not lost on me, and if it fell into the wrong hands, well, we'd all be up the proverbial creek without a paddle. A knock at the door jolted me from my thoughts, and I padded across the room, still wrestling with the tendrils of sleep. I swung the door open to find my best friend Evie, a coffee in each hand, her hazel eyes bright. Ah, Evie. My personal caffeine fairy. If friendship had a smell, it'd be freshly brewed coffee at stupid o'clock in the morning. Morning, sunshine, she greeted, pushing one of the cups into my hands. Figured you'd need this. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee was enough to chase away the last remnants of the nightmare. Thanks. I took a grateful sip. The warm liquid thawed the coldness from the nightmare, grounding me back to reality. Let me go change. Be right back. I headed back to my bedroom, the wooden floor cool beneath my feet. The mirror above my dresser reflected a disheveled version of me, with tangled hair and dark circles under my eyes from the remnants of sleep. I peeled off my sweat-soaked nightgown, tossing it into the laundry basket with a sigh. Great. I looked like a zombie extra from a B-grade horror flick. Maybe I could market this as a new trend, nightmare chic. It'd be all the rage at the Institute for the Arcane Arts. Opening the closet, I pulled out a pair of well-worn jeans and slipped them on. I paired them with a cute floral blouse that added a touch of brightness to my otherwise gloomy mood. My favorite ankle boots, scuffed but stylish, completed the outfit. I ran a brush through my hair, taming the wild strands into something more presentable, and then went into the bathroom and splashed my face with cold water to erase the last traces of the nightmare. Feeling more like myself, I returned to the living room where Evie was waiting. She was flipping through a magazine on the coffee table, her own cup of coffee half empty. Ready to face the day? She asked, looking up with a smile. Ready as I'll ever be. I took another sip of my coffee and feeling the warmth seep into my bones. Evie drank her mocha latte. I came by because I think we should start looking for the Echoing Locket. If we don't find that thing before someone uses it for nefarious purposes, Ingrid will have our heads. I nodded. That locket was Ingrid's pride and joy, a piece of history. Archmage Zephyria's work, no less. If someone can use it to frame others for dark magic they didn't commit, we need to get to Ingrid's office. See what we can scrounge up. Let's do it, bestie. Evie nodded. Try not to bring the building down, young witch, Agatha said. Wouldn't dream of it, but you're coming with us. I finished my coffee and slipped on my jacket. We stepped out into the brisk morning air, a trio bound by friendship, purpose, and the pursuit of a dangerous truth. Emberwick Crossing was waking up around us. Off to Ingrid's office, then. Agatha leapt onto my shoulder, her claws gently grazing my jacket. Yep, I said. My friends and I made our way up the hill towards the Institute for the Arcane Arts. The towering castle-like structure emerged against the blue morning sky, its Gothic spires piercing the clouds. I miss school. Evie was eyeing the grand wrought iron gates that creaked open at our approach. Welcome back to college. I smiled. We navigated through the stone corridors and spiraling staircases until we reached Ingrid's office. The door was ajar, which was unusual for someone like the High Witch who prized privacy like a dragon hoards gold. Looks like the High Witch is not here. I pushed the door open with a tentative hand. Or maybe she's invisible and watching us. Agatha deadpanned, jumping down off my shoulder to prowl the room. Still feeling a little sleepy, I yawned before turning to Evie. Let's see if there's anything weird. Evie nodded, and we began to scour the room looking for clues that help us find the Echoing Locket. Everything appeared untouched, too untouched. Like a stage scene right out of a play. I moved to Ingrid's ornate desk, running my fingers over the polished surface. The neatly stacked papers and pristine quill seemed out of place for someone as busy as the High Witch. I carefully opened the top drawer, revealing an array of precisely organized scrolls and sealed letters. Each item was in perfect order, not a single piece out of alignment. Evie rifled through the bookshelf on the opposite wall. She pulled out volumes at random, flipping through pages and checking for any hidden compartments. Her frustration grew evident as each book revealed nothing but dust and ink. Agatha, prowling the floor with feline grace, stopped at the base of a tall cabinet. She sniffed around its edges before looking up at me with a curious glint in her eyes. Something's off here. She meowed, her tail whooshing with impatience. I joined her, opening the cabinet to find rows of potion bottles and labeled jars, all meticulously arranged. I carefully examined the contents, and everything seemed ordinary. Closing the cabinet, I turned to Evie, who was now inspecting the large, imposing portrait of Ingrid that hung above the desk. Anything? I asked, feeling a sense of urgency rise within me. Evie shook her head, her hazel eyes reflecting our shared frustration. This place is too perfect. It's like she knew we'd come snooping. I approached Ingrid's personal datebook, prominently displayed on a pedestal. The book was locked, and a quick spell from Evie's hand opened it. I flipped through the pages and dates, then I noticed something odd, a torn page seemingly ripped out in haste. It was the only imperfection in an otherwise flawless room. I stepped away from the desk, showing the ripped edges to Evie. Found something. Whatever was on this page, Ingrid didn't want anyone to see it. Evie nodded, a grim look on her face. I heard Freya works here part-time as healer. She might know something. Good call. I glanced at Agatha. You coming? If I have to. My cat lifted her head from where she sniffed at the bookshelf. We found Freya in the infirmary. She had a compassionate countenance that made you want to tell her your life story. Freya, hey, I greeted. Have you noticed anything strange around Ingrid's office lately? There is a missing item, and we're trying to track down what might have happened to it. Not really. Only the usual enchantments. Freya's brow furrowed. There was an odd energy the other night, though. Felt like dark magic static in the air. Holly hell. Because regular magic wasn't complicated enough, now we had to deal with its evil twin. Static could mean a lot of things, but dark magic? That only means one thing, badness. Evie frowned, exchanging a glance with me. Freya shrugged. It's hard to say more without knowing the exact nature of it. Thanks, Freya, I said. We left her to her duties. An odd energy could mean someone was messing with the locket, I said. Or trying on new perfumes. Agatha snickered. That office always smells like a potion gone wrong. Helpful as ever. I rolled my eyes. Let's go back and Evie stopped mid-sentence. Professor Elderwood emerged from a nearby classroom, his auburn hair a disheveled halo around his head. Professor Elderwood, do you have a sec? I called out. Miss Holland, what can I do for you? He lifted a hand, adjusting his glasses in a distracted manner. Did you notice anything unusual around Ingrid's office recently? He scratched his cheek. Yes, dark energies were amiss. He sighed. Your parents, bless their souls, they knew how to read the signs. Used to frequent an old bookshop for rare magical texts. might hold some clues to this darker energy. My chest tightened at the mention of my parents. Their absence felt like a perpetual stub toe on my heart. In Emberwick Crossing? Evie slanted her head. Yes, indeedy. Mystic Tomes it's called. Now run by a peculiar little man, but don't let appearances deceive you, because. Professor Elderwood said, his voice trailing off. Now I can't remember. Anyway, you should check there, kids. Thank you, Professor, I said. Anytime, and do visit the bookshop. Professor Elderwood was wandering off in his own world again. Looks like we've got our next stop, Evie said. Let's just hope this isn't another wild broom chase, Agatha muttered. I laughed. Better than a snipe hunt, Agatha said, sashaying ahead of us. We made our way out of the Institute for the Arcane Arts with a new lead and walked back into town. The door of Mystic Tomes creaked ominously when we stepped into the brightly lit bookshop. The perfume of aged paper mixed with the subtle tang of magic, a cocktail for the senses that made my skin tingle with anticipation. Rows upon rows of ancient tomes and leather-bound volumes lined the shelves. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the large, arched windows, creating an almost ethereal glow. My eyes were drawn to the far corner where a small reading nook was located, complete with overstuffed armchairs and a cold fireplace. The walls were adorned with intricate tapestries depicting scenes from magical history, and every available surface was cluttered with stacks of books. The shop's owner stood behind the counter, his long white beard flowing down to his chest and his brown eyes bright. He gave us a nod, then went back to sorting through a new shipment. We moved further into the bookshop. Each step on the groaning wooden floorboards seemed to echo throughout the building. I half expected the floor to give way and dump us into some magical basement filled with talking books and snarky bookworms. Feels like stepping into a forgotten world, Evie whispered, her gaze sweeping over the spines of countless books. Or a dust mite's paradise. Agatha was perched on my shoulder, her eyes glinting in the brilliant morning light filtering through the stained glass windows. I grinned at her dry humor. We moved deeper into the warren of bookshelves, each one packed with volumes. I felt a buzz under my skin, a tingling sensation tickling my fingertips every time they brushed against the leather-bound spines. Great. I liked that my magic was acting up like an overexcited puppy in a park full of squirrels. This was going to be fun. Whoa, do you guys feel that? My voice was hushed. Feel what? The overwhelming urge to sneeze. Agatha glanced around with a hunter's focus. Your intuition kicking in, Sage? Evie's hazel eyes met mine. Something's calling out to me. I frowned, following the feeling until my hand landed on an out-of-place grimoire, its cover less dusty than the others. Typical. Of all the books in this magical library, I just had to pick the one that screamed danger louder than a banshee at a rock concert. Odd duck out, huh? Evie leaned closer. I pulled the book from its slot. It fell open to a page marked by a cryptic note, symbols floating and glowing before our eyes, clear signs of powerful magic at play. Nothing says relaxing day out, quite like stumbling upon ancient, potentially world-ending magic. Mom and Dad would be so proud. Archmage Zephyria. I instantly recognized the sigils associated with the legendary witch who vanished without a trace. Could this be connected to the Echoing Locket? Did you say Archmage? Oh no, young witch, this is like finding a needle in a haystack. If the needle was also trying to poke your eyes out, Agatha said, her whiskers twitching. Leave it to Agatha to sum up our predicament with a dash of sarcasm and a pinch of impending doom. I couldn't decide whether to laugh or start planning my will. Looks like more than just bedtime stories for dark witches. Evie moved closer, leaning in to study the fragmented messages. I bit my lip, trying to process the gravity of our discovery. We were just two witches and a witchy cat, stumbling upon what could be the magical equivalent of a ticking time bomb. And to think, I'd woken up this morning worried about whether I'd remembered to water my plants. Let's take this with us. We need time to decode it. I tucked the note into my pocket after purchasing the grimoire. I noticed the shopkeeper eyeing us, with an unreadable expression. "Careful, witches," he warned in a gravelly voice. "Careful is my middle name," I replied. "More like reckless," Agatha murmured. I grinned. "Let's not argue semantics now, Agatha." We stepped outside the bookshop and froze. "Think you're going somewhere?" A masked figure snarled, emerging from the shadows with three others clad in dark clothing, bearing the emblem of the supernatural uprising. "Evie, get ready," I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. "Shadow playtime," Agatha hissed, slinking off my shoulder and melding into the shadows around the building. Overhead, the sun rose higher in the sky as it neared afternoon. "Let's have some fun." Evie smirked, rolling her shoulders. "Bring it on." I backed up, conjuring a shield of whirling scripts and glyphs around us. "Look at the little witches and their parlor tricks," one of the attackers mocked, lunging forward with a blade shimmering with dark energy. "Watch it, that's not child's play." "Well, not really," Evie retorted, dodging and weaving through the assault, her potions at the ready. I cast a spell that solidified the air around one assailant, trapping him in place. "Nice trick, young witch." Agatha purred from the shadows, her own magic entwining with the enemy's feet, causing them to stumble. "Keep them busy," I shouted, throwing another spell that burst into blinding light, disorienting the attackers. "Okay," Evie called out, her concoctions turning one assailant into a harmless if rather large fluffy bunny. "Should have brought more than knives to a magic fight," I taunted, feeling adrenaline surge through me as we fought tooth and nail against the mysterious aggressors. "Remember, Sage, no collective triumph," Agatha reminded me, a wry edge to her voice despite the chaos. "Wouldn't dream of it," I promised as we each held our ground. The air fizzed with magical electricity. I deflected another attack, my shield of glyphs shimmering with each impact. One of the masked figures lunged at me, dark magic swirling around their fist. "Sage, watch out," Evie yelled. I ducked, the attacker's fist sailing over my head. "Thanks for the heads up." "Anytime, bestie." Evie grinned, hurling a potion that exploded into a cloud of rainbow smoke. Two assailants stumbled out, coughing and disoriented. One had sprouted donkey ears, the other now sported a peacock tail. I grinned. "Cute look. Really brings out your eyes, masks." "Enough games," the leader snarled, conjuring a whip of crackling power. I raised my hands, ready to counter, when Agatha's voice purred from the shadows. "Allow me, Sage." A tendril of darkness shot out from Agatha, wrapping around the whip and yanking it from the attacker's grasp. "Oops, Butterpaws." Agatha snickered. The leader growled in frustration. "Take them down." The four assailants charged, magic pulsing from their hands. I braced myself, drawing on my power to craft a new spell. "Hey, uglies!" Evie shouted, lobbing another potion. "Catch!" The vial shattered at their feet, releasing a swarm of glowing butterflies. The delicate insects swarmed the attackers, their wings leaving trails of sparkling dust. "Ah, how sweet," I teased. "They like you." One of the masked figures sneezed violently, stumbling backward. "What is this stuff?" Evie smirked. "Just a little pixie dust. Side effects may include sneezing, itching, and sudden urges to frolic in meadows." I seized the opportunity, weaving a complex pattern in the air. The ground beneath the attacker's feet softened, transforming into sticky taffy. "What the hell?" one yelped, struggling to lift their feet. "Sage, you genius." Evie cackled. "Now that's what I call a sticky situation." I grinned, but my victory was short-lived. The leader raised their hands, dark energy sizzling and sparking between his palms. "Enough of this nonsense," he roared. A wave of black magic exploded outward, shattering my taffy trap and sending us flying backward. I hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from my lungs. "Sage!" Evie called out, scrambling to her feet. I pushed myself up, wincing. "I'm okay. Where's Agatha?" A low growl answered my question. Agatha materialized from the shadows, fur standing on end. "Right here, Sage." And not amused. The leader of the masked group stalked forward, dark energy swirling around them like a malevolent aura. You've been a thorn in our side for too long. It's time to end this. I stood my ground, magic tingling at my fingertips. Bring it on, ugly. The leader's hands shot forward, tendrils of darkness lashing out like venomous snakes. I threw up a hasty shield, the impact making my teeth rattle. Evie darted to the side, fumbling with her potions. I'm running low here, guys. Then make it count. I shouted, reinforcing my shield while another barrage of dark magic slammed into it. Agatha's voice echoed from my side. Perhaps it's time for a change of tactics, kittens. Before I could ask what she meant, Agatha burst from the darkness, growing to the size of a panther. She pounced on one of the masked figures, her shadowy form passing right through them. The attacker screamed, his body convulsing as Agatha's magic coursed through them. The man collapsed, twitching. Holy crap, Agatha! Evie exclaimed. Since when could you do that? Agatha's disembodied voice chuckled. A lady never reveals all her secrets, honey. The remaining attackers hesitated, clearly unnerved by Agatha's display. I seized the moment, channeling my power into a new spell. Hey, Mask Squad! I called out. Ever wonder what it's like to be a pinball? I clapped my hands together, and suddenly the air around us solidified into shimmering, translucent walls. The attackers found themselves trapped in a giant, magical pinball machine. Evie, now! I yelled. My best friend grinned, pulling out her last potion. Time for the grand finale. She hurled the vial into the center of my magical construct. It exploded in a burst of swirling, kaleidoscopic energy. The masked figures were sent ricocheting off the walls, bouncing wildly when my magic and Evie's potion combined into a dizzying light show. Woo! High score! Evie cheered. I maintained the spell, sweat beading on my forehead. I kept the magical pinball machine running. Agatha, a little help here? With pleasure, young witch. Shadows coalesced around the bouncing attackers, forming into ghostly hands that grabbed and spun them, adding to their disorientation. The leader, however, wasn't going down without a fight. They managed to steady themselves mid-bounce, dark magic crackling around them. Enough, they roared, releasing a pulse of energy that shattered my spell. The magical walls dissipated, and our opponents tumbled to the ground, groaning and disoriented. All except the leader, who stood tall, radiating fury. You think this is a game? He snarled. You have no idea what forces you're dealing with. I stepped forward, magic swirling around my hands. Why don't you enlighten us then? Who are you working for? The leader laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. You'll find out soon enough. This was just a taste of what's to come. The mages raised their hands, sinister power gathering between their palms. I braced myself for another attack, but instead, the energy exploded outward in a blinding flash. When the spots cleared from my vision, the masked figures were gone. Well, that was dramatic. Evie sighed, brushing dust off her clothes. I nodded, the adrenaline slowly fading. Yeah, but they got away. And we're no closer to figuring out what's going on. Agatha materialized beside me, back in her normal cat form. Don't be so sure, young witch. I managed to snag a little souvenir. She dropped something at my feet, a small, silver pin bearing the emblem of the supernatural uprising. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand. Nice work, Agatha. Always happy to help. Now I believe I was promised tuna for my efforts? Evie laughed. Guys, what do we do now? Those creeps know where to find us. I pocketed the pin, my mind racing. We need to tell the High Witch. And tell Brad, Evie added. He needs to know what's going on. I nodded, trying to ignore the flutter in my chest at the mention of Brad's name. Right. Let's get out of here before they want a rematch. Chapter 2. The afternoon air had a chill to it, biting at my exposed skin. Agatha, Evie and I trudged down the streets that led back to mine and Agatha's place. Agatha sauntered beside me while Evie's boots clicked loudly against the stone. Trouble has a scent, and I smell it on you three. I turned, finding Councilman Alden Voss materializing from the trees. His presence was like a dark cloud descending upon us. He stood tall, his tailored suit impeccable despite the late hour, eyes sharp and beady under the elegant sweep of his dark hair streaked with silver. Fantastic. The universe decided we hadn't suffered enough for one day. It had to throw Mr. Perfect Hair even in a hurricane at us, too. It is time that you stay out of matters that don't concern you, Miss Holland. The councilman's voice dripped with condescension. The locket is not your concern. I crossed my arms and glared at the enemy. Holy hell if it isn't Mr. Sunshine himself. And here I thought we'd get home without any more drama. My sassometer was cranked up to 11. Probably not the smartest move when facing a powerful warlock, but hey, go big or go home, right? Your levity is misplaced, Councilman Voss said coldly. The path you're on is fraught with peril. It would be unfortunate should you continue to interfere. Is that a threat, Councilman? Evie huffed, stepping forward with a hint of a threat in her voice. You tell him, Evie. I'd hug her if I wasn't worried about ruining her intimidating stance. But hey, no pressure or anything. Just the fate of the magical world, potentially hanging in the balance. You know, typical witch-tastic stuff. Consider it sage advice. His lips curled into an oily smirk. Ooh, sage advice, get it? Agatha laughed dryly. Because our sage always needs guidance from the likes of you, Councilman. I could always count on Agatha to throw a verbal grenade into tense situations. It was like having a sarcastic, furry bodyguard. I lifted my chin. I appreciate your concern, but I can handle myself. The words came out strong, but inside I felt like a wobbly Jenga tower. One wrong move and I'd crumble. But hey, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that sometimes you gotta bluff your way through life's poker game. Fake it till you make it. I hoped my bravado wasn't as transparent as it felt. Very well. Councilman Voss gave a curt nod, his blue stare hard and ominous. But remember, some secrets are best left buried, with those who guard them. I rolled my eyes. I swear, these council types must have a guidebook for ominous one-liners. I clenched my fists, feeling the magic surge through me. Buried secrets? That's rich coming from you, Councilman. I bet you've got enough skeletons in your closet to start a dance troupe. The magic tingled in my fingertips, a reminder of the power I held. It was both thrilling and terrifying, like riding a roller coaster blindfolded. Councilman Voss's nostrils flared, a crack in his polished facade. You're treading on thin ice, Ms. Holland. Good thing I'm a pro at ice skating, I shot back, adrenaline making me bolder. Where was this sass coming from? It's like my mouth had a mind of its own, spitting out quips faster than I could think them up. Part of me wanted to high-five myself, while another part was screaming to shut up before I dug my grave deeper. Evie snorted, her hand on my shoulder. Careful, Sage. His ego might melt that ice. Agatha stretched lazily, tail swishing. Yes, I'd say his ego's big enough to sink the Titanic, but that'd be an insult to icebergs everywhere. Such insolence, Councilman Voss hissed, his composure slipping. You have no idea what forces you're meddling with. I scoffed. Please. I've dealt with worse things in the Institute's cafeteria. But a nagging voice in the back of my head wondered if I was in over my head this time. I rolled my eyes. Oh, please spare us the cryptic villain monologue. We've all seen this movie before. Yeah, Evie chimed in. Next, you'll be twirling your mustache and tying someone to train tracks. Councilman Voss's face darkened. You find this amusing? Your ignorance is truly staggering. More like willful defiance. But with each passing moment, I felt the gravity of the situation sinking in. This wasn't just another council squabble. Something bigger was brewing, and I was stirring the pot. I stepped back. Nah. What's staggering is how you managed to fit that massive ego through doorways. The councilman's hands began to glow with an ominous orange fire. Perhaps a demonstration of the stakes is in order. Oh crap. This was escalating faster than a magical duel at the academy. My heart pounded, but I forced my face to remain neutral. No way was I giving him the satisfaction of seeing me sweat. Evie tensed beside me. "Whoa there, Sparky. Let's not do anything hasty." I raised an eyebrow at Councilman Voss. Resorting to violence already? And here I thought we were having such a lovely chat. Councilman Voss snarled. "Your flippancy will be your downfall." Evie crossed her arms. "And your condescension will be yours. We're not backing down." "Yeah," Agatha added. "So why don't you take your fancy suit and inflated sense of self-importance elsewhere?" Councilman Voss's lip curled. "You're making a grave mistake, children." I shrugged. "Wouldn't be the first time. But at least my mistakes don't involve bad hair dye and megalomania." My heart thumped wildly, a mix of adrenaline and defiance coursing through me. Part of me knew I should probably shut up, but the words tumbled out anyway. Voss's condescension always brought out my snarkiest side. The councilman's face flushed an impressive shade of crimson. "You insolent little bitch." Now, Agatha interrupted. "No need for name-calling. Though if we're going there, I've got a few choice ones for you, Councilman." Councilman Voss took a deep breath, visibly trying to regain his composure. "This petty banter changes nothing. The locket is beyond your comprehension." I snorted. "Right, because only the almighty Voss can possibly understand its immense power. Give me a break." I wanted to believe I could handle it, but doubt gnawed at the edges of my confidence. What if Voss was right? Councilman Voss sneered. "Your mockery only proves my point. You're children playing with forces beyond your control." Evie stepped forward, her voice steely. "And you're an adult throwing a temper tantrum because we won't play by your rules." Councilman Voss's hands clenched at his sides. "You will regret this defiance. You foolish children have no idea what's coming." "Archmage will," he cut himself off abruptly, but the damage was done. We all froze, the cheeky atmosphere evaporating in an instant. "Archmage?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. As in, the same Archmage who vanished after the Great Magical Schism? My mind reeled, struggling to process this info. Archmage was supposed to be a myth, a boogeyman to scare young witches. If she was really alive and real and involved in this mess, we were in way over our heads. Councilman Voss's face had gone pale. "I've said nothing." Agatha's fur stood on end. "Oh, you've said plenty, Councilman. Seems like the cat's out of the bag and this cat wants answers." "Spill it, Voss," Evie demanded, all traces of humor gone from her voice. "What's Archmage, the High Witch's sister, got to do with any of this?" The councilman's jaw clenched. "This conversation is over." I stepped forward, my heart pounding. "Like hell it is. You can't drop a bomb like that and just walk away." Panic clawed at my throat. We needed answers, and Voss was our only lead. I couldn't let him slip away, not when we were so close to uncovering the truth. "Watch me." Councilman Voss huffed, raising his hands. A gust of wind whipped around us, and before we could react, the councilman vanished in a swirl of leaves and magic. "Well shit," I muttered, staring at the spot where he'd been. Frustration and fear battled for dominance in my chest. We'd pushed too hard, and now Voss was in the wind with all his secrets. I felt like we'd just lost our only chance at understanding what we were up against. Evie turned to me, his face grim. "Sage, what do we do now?" I took a deep breath. "We find out everything we can about Archmage and her connection to the locket. And we do it fast. Before Voss and his cronies can stop us." Evie squeezed my shoulder. "Hey, we've got this. Team Badass Witches, remember?" I couldn't help smiling. "Yeah, Team Badass Witches. With one token warlock, Brad." Evie cleared her throat. "We should probably get moving. Who knows how long before Voss sends reinforcements?" "Right." I nodded, squaring my shoulders. "Let's bounce before things get even messier." Agatha sighed. Well, he was about as subtle as a unicorn at a horse race. I'd have to be an idiot not to pick up on that thinly veiled threat. Unfortunately for him, subtlety and I were only nodding acquaintances. The locket, the secrets, the veiled threats, it was like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle in the dark while wearing oven mitts. Agatha strolled ahead on the sidewalk. Well, that was fun. Nothing like a cryptic warning from a power-hungry warlock to really spice up an evening stroll. I snorted and started walking again. Yeah, because our lives weren't exciting enough already. We should send him a thank you note for livening things up. Ooh, can I dictate it? Evie clapped her hands and kept pace beside me. Dear Councilman Voss, thanks for the ominous warning. We were worried we might have a peaceful afternoon for once. Kisses, your favorite troublemakers. I cracked a smile. Leave it to Agatha and Evie to find humor in the face of danger. It was probably why we got along so well. That, and Agatha's inexplicable ability to always know where I'd hidden the good snacks. Evie sighed, her earlier bravado fading into weariness. We should get moving. I don't fancy another run-in with any more council members or their lackeys. I nodded. I've had my fill of cryptic warnings for one day. Let's go home and figure out our next move. The tension in my shoulders eased a bit at the thought of retreating to familiar territory. Home meant safety, a place where we could regroup and strategize without looking over our shoulders every 2 seconds. Plus, I was dying for a cup of chamomile tea and maybe some of those cookies Evie pretended not to like, but always managed to sneak when she thought I wasn't looking. Evie frowned, tucking a lock of her jet black hair behind her ear. His threats barely masked his own fear. What do you think he's so desperate to hide? Well, we already know he's involved with the supernatural uprising, and possibly he's connected to that locket, I replied. Careful, young witch, Agatha warned, her yellow eyes gleaming. You're playing with fire, and not just because Councilman Voss loves his little pyrotechnics. I shrugged. Then let's not get burned. He doesn't scare me, well, maybe a little. We need to find out what they're planning. If the Echoing Locket is involved, we could be facing something big, something that could change everything for the magical community. Or end it, Evie said gravely. The stakes are sky high, Sage. A small voice in the back of my head whispered that maybe we should be more scared. After all, we were up against powerful forces with unknown motives, but fear wouldn't solve anything. Action would. I know. We've got each other's backs, remember? Of course, yeah. Evie smiled, though worry shadowed her features. I wished I could erase that worry from her face. Evie had always been the cautious one, the voice of reason to balance out my impulsiveness. Let's just hope our backs are fireproof, Agatha said, already moving ahead. Come on, witches. We've got work to do. I thrust a fist in the air and made a joke. Watch out, magical world. The troublemakers were on the case, and we weren't about to let a little thing like mortal peril stop us. This was bigger than anything we'd faced before, but it was also a chance to prove ourselves, to make a difference. And if we happened to uncover some juicy magical secrets along the way, well, that was just a bonus. We reached my home just as the afternoon sunlight beamed down on us, splashing the sky with yellows and oranges. My house, a cozy cottage with an overgrown garden, felt like a vacay after the day's chaos. After everything that had happened, I craved the comfort of my own space like a warm hug. Welcome to the witch's den, I announced, pushing open the door. Let's crack this code. I took the note from my pocket and set the grimoire it came in on the coffee table. The cryptic note was spread out on the surface, its symbols seemingly mocking us with their secrets. Agatha hopped onto the table and hissed. Evie turned on the bright overhead lights, and I opened the curtains to let the sunshine into the room. The symbols on the paper seemed to dance under the light, taunting me with their hidden meaning. A mix of excitement and dread churned in my gut. Whatever this message held, it was big. Like, change our lives forever big. All right, let's put my family's translation spell to the test, I said, reaching for my late grandmother's grimoire. The ancient leather-bound book was stiff as I flipped through the pages, finding the incantation passed down through generations. Graham's presence seemed to linger in every word, guiding me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for whatever we were about to uncover. "Here it is," I said, feeling the spark of magic tingling at my fingertips. "Linguae antiquitatis, revelare veritatem." The room thrummed with energy. The symbols on the paper began to shimmer and twist, rearranging themselves into words I could understand. Holy hell! I blinked, my eyes widening. "It says Archmage lives." My heart skipped a beat. Archmage? The boogeyman of the magical world was real? And alive? This was next-level bonkers. Like, literally. Evie peered over my shoulder. "Looks like it. And if she's alive?" I swallowed hard, unsure how to process the bombshell we just uncovered. A chill ran through me as the implications hit. If Archmage was out there, everything we thought we knew about our world could be a lie. Talk about an existential crisis. Then all our worst nightmares are having a party, Agatha finished flatly. Evie grimaced. Just when you thought things couldn't get more warped. Okay, I think it's time to scry. I stood up, moving to set up the crystal ball that had been passed down my family line for who knew how long. The orb was etched with delicate patterns, each swirl and line holding the weight of my ancestors' gaze. This wasn't just any scrying session, we were potentially peeking into the darkest corners of our world. But someone had to do it, right? Might as well be the girl with a knack for stumbling into trouble. Be careful, Sage. Scrying can attract unwanted attention, Agatha warned. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the swarm of butterflies in my stomach. Agatha's warning echoed my own fears, but I couldn't let that stop me. We needed answers, and I was determined to find them. Relax, we're just going to take a little peek, I reassured her, though my heart thumped hard. Nervously, I focused on the crystal ball, letting my magic flow freely. The mist within churned, then cleared, revealing an image of Archmage Zephyria. She stood in a dark room adorned with occult symbols, speaking to a shadowy figure. My breath caught in my throat. Archmage was alive and right in front of us. Part of me wanted to look away, to pretend I hadn't seen her, but I forced myself to keep watching, knowing that ignorance wouldn't protect us. Be extra cautious, Archmage's voice came through, cold and calculated. The Echoing Locket is key to our uprising. We must not falter now. Who's she talking to? Evie whispered. Can't see their face. But whoever they are, they're part of the supernatural uprising movement, I replied. A coldness ran through me. I realized the enormity of what we were witnessing. This wasn't just some small-time magical mischief, this was a full-blown conspiracy that could change everything. Probably another council member, Agatha said, her tone dripping with disdain. Birds of a feather plot tyranny together. Shush, I'm trying to listen, I said. Ensure the preparations are complete now that I have the locket back from my sister, Archmage continued. And remember, discretion is paramount. We cannot afford another setback. Setback? I wonder what happened. Evie murmured. Could be thanks to us, I said with a smirk. A spark of pride flickered in my chest. Maybe we weren't just bumbling around in the dark after all. Maybe we were actually making a difference, even if we didn't realize it. Or someone else is working against them, Agatha said. Brad? Was he working alone on this? Either way, we know what we're up against now, I said, pulling away from the crystal ball. Archmage is alive, and she's planning something big. Really big, with the locket. Then we're all screwed, Evie said, setting her jaw. You can say that again, Agatha said. The game is afoot. And we'll need every ounce of magic and wit to stay one step ahead. I felt a fire kindled in my chest, a burning desire to uncover the truth and protect the only world I'd ever loved. We'd gone looking for answers and found a whole new set of questions instead. But at least now we had a direction, a purpose. Chapter 3. I had just finished aligning the living room chakras with a new spell when the knock came. There was no mistaking that rhythm. It had the same cadence as my heartbeat whenever I thought of finding the echoing locket. A little rush of excitement fluttered in my chest as I opened the door to find Brad standing there, looking like an Abercrombie model who'd lost his way and ended up in our quaint magical suburb. My breath caught in my throat. Damn, why did he have to show up now looking like a snack? Just when I thought I'd mastered the art of magical feng shui, here comes Brad to shake up my carefully arranged kai. It's like the universe had a twisted sense of humor. But I couldn't deny the spark of joy his presence ignited. "Hey stranger," I said, leaning against the doorframe. My gaze swept over him, spiky dark brown hair that looked like it had been styled by a tempest, those sexy blue eyes, and casual clothes that somehow accentuated his well-built frame. He wore a simple white tee that hugged his biceps in all the right ways, and jeans that were lovingly frayed at the edges. "Lost your way to the gym?" I teased. I bit my lip, trying to keep my cool. It was like he'd stepped out of my daydreams, all rugged charm and effortless sex appeal. The covenant of veiled boundaries could go stuff itself for all I cared in that moment. I inwardly groaned. Maybe next I could ask him to flex, just to really drive home how not affected I am. The covenant, aka the ultimate relationship block of the magical world. They probably had a secret division dedicated to ruining moments like these. I could almost picture their slogan, keeping hot warlocks and witches apart since forever. He flashed me that lopsided grin, the one that always made me feel like we were 2 steps away from trouble. "Nah, just taking the scenic route to see you." My heart did a little somersault. How did he always manage to say the right thing? It was infuriating and intoxicating all at once. "Enter at your own risk." I smiled, stepping aside to let him in. Holy hell, did he have to look so damn good? The Witches' Council would have a field day if they knew what kind of impure thoughts were swirling in my head about the boy next door. "Nice place you got here." Brad whistled appreciatively as he strolled into the living room, my magically enhanced abode. "New spellwork?" Pride swelled in my chest. I'd poured my heart into this space, infusing every corner with a piece of myself. It was more than just decor, it was an extension of my magic, my soul. But at least someone appreciated my magical OCD. I was a regular, magical Martha Stewart. Perks of being an interior designer with a knack for enchantments. I gave him a nonchalant shrug while closing the door behind him. It had been a month since he dropped the L-bomb, and I threw it right back like a hot potato. I told him I had to let him go, but it hurt. Easier said than done. A month. 4 weeks of pretending I didn't miss him, of telling myself I made the right choice. And here he was, looking like a walking reminder of everything I'd given up. The universe really had a sick sense of humor. Or maybe it was just testing my resolve. Either way, I was pretty sure I was failing spectacularly. "How you been?" He was leaning against my bookshelf lined with ancient tomes and modern spellbooks alike. Such a loaded question. I missed him so much my heart ached. Memories flooded back, passionate kisses, late-night dates that turned into make-out sessions. But those days were gone, crushed under the burden of duty and ancient laws. I swallowed hard, pushing down the lump in my throat. I pushed a blue-streaked lock of hair behind my ear. "Still looking for the echoing locket." Brad nodded, his expression turning serious. "Which is why I'm here. I want to help if I can. You know, keep it out of the wrong hands." His offer to help sent a spark of affection through me, quickly doused by the cold reality of our situation. The covenant of veiled boundaries loomed between us like an invisible wall. "Brad, you know we can't be more than friends," I said, but he cut me off. "Hey, I get it. Star-crossed lovers, different magical backgrounds, blah blah blah." His voice was gentle but firm. "But this isn't about us, Sage. It's bigger than some high school romance rekindled. We've got skills that complement each other, and you know it." His words hit home. We did make a great team. But working together would be like dangling a cookie in front of a starving person. Pure torture. "High school romance, huh?" I smirked, rolling my eyes. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Call it whatever you want, but we were high school sweethearts, he said, stepping closer, close enough for me to catch a whiff of his cologne, sandalwood, musk, and something uniquely Brad and extra yummy. It took every ounce of willpower not to lean in closer. I was playing with fire, and I knew it. But you can't deny we make a pretty damn good team. I wanted to reach out to touch him, but I clenched my fists instead. The fate of Emberwick Crossing was at stake. I sighed with mock seriousness, tapping my chin. Okay, partner. Let's find that locket. But remember, we're strictly in the friend zone. The High Witch would have our heads otherwise. Scout's honor, he replied, holding up 3 fingers and winking. Did you ever even go to Scouts? I laughed, shaking my head. He grinned. Details. Purely platonic, I reiterated, my voice wavering. We're in this for the greater good, not for whatever we had. Brad nodded, his lips quirking into a half-smile. Platonic partners in supernatural crime fighting. Though my resolve wavered when he flashed that boyish grin that always melted my defenses. I swallowed hard. All right then. Now about that lead. Wait, Brad interrupted, stepping closer. Before we dive into all that, I just want to say, I missed you, Sage. A lot. My heart somersaulted in my chest. I missed you too, Brad. More than you know. He closed the distance between us in 2 strides, his eyes searching mine. Sage, he whispered, his breath warm on my cheek. Then his lips were on mine, and the world fell away. The kiss was electric, fierce, and passionate. It ignited something primal within me, a hunger I'd tried to bury. His hands found my waist, pulling me closer, and I melted into him. I ran my fingers through his hair, relishing its softness. Brad's stubble scratched my chin, sending tingles across my skin. He tasted like mint and possibility, familiar yet thrilling. It felt like coming home after a long journey, only to realize the place you left was where you belonged all along. We broke apart, both breathless. Brad rested his forehead against mine, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Wow, I murmured, my lips still tingling. Brad chuckled softly. Yeah, wow. Reality came crashing back. I stepped away, wrapping my arms around myself. Brad, we can't. I know, he said, his voice husky. But damn, I needed that. Me too, I admitted, my chest tight with regret and longing. But it can't happen again. You know the rules. Brad ran a hand through his hair, messing it up in that adorable way I loved. Screw the rules, Sage. This feels right. I shook my head, even as every fiber of my wanted to kiss him again. The High Witch would never allow it. We'd be risking everything. Maybe it's worth the risk, Brad said, his tone serious. He took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. Don't you ever wonder what we could be if we gave us a real shot? I bit my lip, fighting the urge to throw caution to the wind. Of course I do. But we have responsibilities, Brad. The supernatural uprising, the fate of the magical community, the law forbidding us to be together, it's bigger than us. Brad's shoulders slumped. You're right. As always. He managed a weak smile. Doesn't make it any easier, though. I squeezed his hand. I know. But hey, at least we get to work together, right? Platonic partners and all that. Yeah, Brad said, brightening a little. So about that lead. Right, the lead, I said, trying to regain my composure. What did you find? It was in an old journal, buried under a pile of forgotten lore in the library's hidden chamber that once belonged to the apprentice of Archmage, who we know mysteriously vanished into Emberwick Crossing's underbelly. I kept stealing glances at him. The way his brow furrowed in concentration, the slight quirk of his lips when he was thinking, it was all so achingly him. Go on, I urged. Brad paced. The apprentice wrote about an older district that even the locals avoided. A place where our infamous Archmage dabbled in dark magic and plotted for power. Sounds charming. And you think that's where we'll find the Echoing Locket? Maybe. It's our best shot, he replied. We should definitely check it out. But maybe we should bring backup this time? After what happened last month with that rogue pixie swarm. I laughed, the tension between us easing. Don't tell me you're still sore about that. Brad rubbed his arm, wincing dramatically. Hey, those little guys pack a punch. I had welts for days. Poor baby, I teased. Next time, I'll be sure to kiss it better. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Brad's gaze snapped to mine, and the air between us charged once more. Sage, he said, his voice low and rough. I held up a hand. I know. Just kidding. Platonic, remember? Brad nodded, but his gaze lingered on my lips. Right. Platonic. We stood there for a moment. Finally, I cleared my throat. So, about that backup. I was thinking we could ask go it alone this time. Good idea, Brad agreed. But Evie's potions have saved our butts more times than I can count. I grinned. True. Remember that time she turned that angry troll into a fluffy hamster? Brad laughed, the sound warming me from the inside out. How could I forget? The look on its face was priceless. But reality had a way of intruding. My familiar Agatha sauntered into the room, fixing us with a knowing stare. Well, she drawled. Isn't this cozy? Should I come back later, or are you two done swooning over each other? I felt my cheeks heat up. We're just discussing strategy, Brad finished smoothly. Agatha's tail swished skeptically. Aha. And I suppose that strategy involved swapping saliva? Agatha. I hissed, mortified. Brad coughed, avoiding my gaze. Are you ready to take a little carpet ride? Are we talking about that ratty old thing your dad calls transportation? I teased. Hey, it gets the job done, Brad defended with a chuckle. Just hold on tight. I grinned, grabbing my coat. We stepped out the door, leaving behind the warmth of my living room and the lingering heat of our forbidden kiss. Brad turned back on the porch, his expression soft. For what it's worth, I don't regret it. Any of it. My heart swelled. Me neither, I whispered. The abandoned district of Emberwick Crossing swallowed us whole, a desolate expanse of decay where magic hung heavy in the air like a suffocating mist. Once resplendent structures now stood as crumbling sentinels to a bygone era, their facades marred by the relentless passage of time and dark spells. A pervasive sense of foreboding crept over me as we navigated the twisted streets, strewn with debris from failed enchantments and littered with the remnants of protective hexes. Can you feel that? I murmured, my senses prickling. Like static on my skin, Brad replied, scanning our surroundings with cautious intensity. We landed on a patch of weeds and overgrown grass and stepped off. The carpet curled up and zoomed away. Brad frowned. Damn, now we need to find another way home, he grumbled. We picked our way through the ruins. Suddenly guardians, nightmarish creatures twisted by dark magic appeared. Holy hell, I said, staring at the first ghastly figure. A wolf with scales shimmering in the dim light prowled forward, its red eyes seething with hatred. The second creature, more humanoid in shape, dragged its elongated limbs across the pavement, claws scraping, its body slick with an oil that sizzled upon contact with the ground. These creatures. I've heard about them, Brad said, his voice tense as he eyed the monstrous forms. They are loyal servants to Archmage. But now, they've been corrupted by her dark magic. I glanced at him. What does that mean for us? It means they'll stop at nothing to protect their master's secrets, Brad replied grimly. Watch out for that icky stuff, I warned, pointing at the corrosive liquid pooling around our feet. Got it. Brad nodded, positioning himself back to back with me. The third monstrosity loomed larger than the others, like a golem made of stone and mud, constantly shifting shape as if deciding which form would best spell our doom. Party crashers are the worst, Brad said, readjusting his stance. I extended my hands, drawing upon my magic. You take tall, dark, and ugly. I've got scales and oily. Copy that. The battle was swift and brutal. We moved in unison, spells and counterspells weaving an intricate tapestry of survival. With every incantation, I poured my will into subduing these abominations of nature, with strategies while Brad summoned barriers and constructs to deflect our assailants' vicious attacks. I felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through me. "Sage," Brad called out as we fought, "don't hold back." "Like I ever do." Smirking, I dodged another swipe from the wolf creature's razor-sharp talons. "Let's wrap this up. I've got a date with Destiny, and she hates being kept waiting." "Destiny's got nothing on you, babe," Brad replied, admiration in his tone. With our combined strength and cunning, we killed the 3 creatures. I panted when the last of the creatures lay defeated at our feet. "Come on, let's find that archmage or the locket before more party favors show up uninvited," I urged. With a nod, Brad followed me deeper into the heart of Emberwick Crossing's abandoned district. I felt a magical sensation leading past buildings and abandoned cars. Ah, the joys of a magical scavenger hunt in the creepiest part of town. Nothing says fun date night like dodging tetanus-ridden debris and hoping we don't stumble upon any wayward ghosts with unfinished business. At least Brad's company made the whole ordeal slightly less terrifying. His presence was like a walking, talking security blanket, if security blankets could cast spells and had great hair. I felt it the strongest outside a creepy laboratory. Why couldn't it be a nice, cozy bakery or a cheerful flower shop? But no, apparently sinister secrets and world-altering magic preferred the ambiance of mad scientist lairs. We stood before the ancient door, marked with glowing runes. Its power pulsed like a heartbeat against the silence of the area. The door's pulsing magic reminded me of those novelty t-shirts with built-in LED lights, except this one probably came with a side of potential doom. I wondered if Archmage had a flair for the dramatic, or if ominous, glowing entrances were just standard issue for powerful magic users. Maybe I should consider adding some pizzazz to my own front door. I observed, eyeing the door's ornate carvings. "Ready to crack this cryptic code?" I tried to sound confident. In reality, my insides were doing an interpretive dance routine. "You can do this, Sage." Brad gestured at the door. Brad's unwavering faith in my abilities was touching, really. It was also mildly terrifying. What if I messed up? What if, instead of unlocking the door, I accidentally summoned a horde of paperclips with a vendetta against humanity? I reached out tentatively, hands hovering over the runes. Their eerie light cast ghostly shadows on our faces, our final barrier to Archmage's secrets. I took a deep breath, then exhaled, tracing the patterns with my fingertips. The faint brilliance brightened at my touch, bending to the will of my magic. I began the magical equivalent of picking a lock with a strand of spaghetti. The runes responded to my touch, their glow intensifying like I'd just flipped the switch on the world's fanciest nightlight. I silently prayed that this wasn't some elaborate magical prank show, and that the door wouldn't suddenly burst open to reveal a laughing archmage and a camera crew. Although, given the state of my hair after trekking through the abandoned district, I definitely wasn't ready for my close-up. "Got it," I murmured. Then the door swung open, revealing a half-light lit staircase that spiraled downward like a descent into the abyss itself, or hell. With a nod at Brad, I took the lead. "Watch your step," I said, half to myself and half to Brad. The air grew colder, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones. Flickering torches placed on the walls cast long, moving shadows along the corridor. The stone steps were worn and uneven. "Feels like we're walking into a trap," Brad whispered, his voice reverberating in the confined stairwell. "Doesn't it always?" My heart thundered in my chest, but I kept going. This locket was important to protecting the magic of my hometown, the very same magic Archmage sought to control. The staircase ended, opening into a vast underground chamber. It was like stepping into a mausoleum of magical sciences. The room was an alchemist's fever dream, cluttered with tables holding bubbling potions and strange herbs that even I couldn't name. Animal cages, some occupied, some disturbingly empty, lined the walls. The place smelled like enigma magic, dust, and decay, a redolence so potent it was almost a taste on the tongue. "Creepy doesn't begin to cover it," I said, scanning the eerie lab equipment. At the center of the room stood a large, ornate pedestal, and upon it, an open book, glistening in an eerie glow. Its pages seemed to turn off their own volition, as if inviting us to look closer. "Is that what I think it is?" Brad asked. We both knew it could only be one thing: Archmage's personal grimoire. Yup, a dark witch's grimoire. I approached the pedestal cautiously, stretching out a hand to let the tips of my fingers brush against the parchment. The moment my skin made contact, the pages fluttered like the wings of a trapped bird, then stilled to reveal Archmage's plan. It detailed the use of the Echoing Locket to amplify her own dark magic, to bend the wills of others like twigs before her mighty intention. My body trembled. "Check it out, looks like Archmage has big plans." Brad shook his head. "What a damn control freak. We have to stop this, Brad. No matter what." Reading the intricate diagrams and notes spilled across the grimoire's pages, detailing the twisted creation of those creatures we'd narrowly escaped. My breath caught. I read something unexpected, my parents' names etched in the margins. A revelation that struck like a bolt of lightning. My stomach lurched. I knew my parents had opposed the plans for the supernatural uprising, and that their defiance was met with silence, permanent silence. The truth hit me like a sucker punch to the gut. All this time, I'd been living in a fog of uncertainty, grasping at straws to understand why they were taken from me. Now, the pieces were falling into place, forming a picture so horrifying I almost wished I could unsee it. My parents, the pillars of my world, had been silenced not by chance, but by malevolent design. The weight of this knowledge pressed down on me, threatening to crush my spirit. "Holy hell," I whispered. "It's true, the supernatural uprising movement murdered them, possibly on Archmage's orders." My mind reeled, struggling to process this earth-shattering revelation. How many nights had I spent wondering, hoping that their death was just a tragic accident? Now, knowing the truth, I felt a surge of emotions, grief, anger, and a fierce determination that burned through my veins like liquid fire. They died fighting for what was right, and I'd be damned if I let their sacrifice be in vain. Brad laid a hand on my shoulder. "We'll make this right, Sage. For them." I wanted to believe him, to cling to the hope in his words. But a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispered doubts. How could we, two young magic users barely out of school, hope to stand against a force powerful enough to orchestrate my parents' demise? Before we could even consider our next move, a hidden door slid open on the far side of the lab. Archmage Zephyria Nightspire appeared, the embodiment of dread authority. She was draped in dark clothing embroidered with ancient runes that thrummed with latent power. Her raven hair was woven into braids so intricate they were artworks unto themselves. Her eyes, cold, dark pools, were filled with malevolent intelligence. The smile that curled her lips was chilling. My heart hammered against my ribcage and matched the panic rising in my throat. This was the woman responsible for so much pain, so much loss. I wanted to scream, to lash out with every ounce of magic I possessed. But fear held me in place, my limbs frozen as if caught in a binding spell. "Looks like we've got company," Brad said. How could he sound so collected when we were face to face with the architect of our nightmares? I envied his composure, wishing I could borrow just a fraction of it. "Hello there." Archmage's voice slithered through the air, smooth and cold, every word calculated. "You've come far, but this is where your journey ends. The Echoing Locket will ensure my rule, and no one will stand in my way." Her words sent ice through my veins. The Echoing Locket, that damned magical artifact that had caused so much strife. Panic flared within me, hot and wild, but before it could translate into action, the Dark Witch lifted her hand. Magic crackled from her fingertips, weaving into a spell that swept over us like an unstoppable tide. I was desperately trying to conjure a counterspell, anything to shield us from her magic. But it was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a paper fan. I felt helpless, my own magical abilities seeming laughably inadequate in the face of such raw power. "Brad." I reached for him, but it was too late. Blinding light enveloped us, disorienting, pulling us away from that underground tomb of secrets. When my vision cleared, we were teleported back in Emberwick Crossing, standing dazed in the streets. The sudden shift left me reeling, my senses struggling to adjust. One moment we were face to face with our nemesis, and the next we were back on home turf. It felt like a cop-out, like we'd been dismissed as mere annoyances rather than genuine threats. The thought stung my pride and fueled my determination. "Damn, she's powerful," Brad muttered, his gaze sweeping our surroundings. "Powerful, extra crazy and scared," I corrected, my obstinacy hardening like set concrete. "We may be back where we started, but we have more information now. We know her plans, and we know she's afraid of us." "Right. Yeah." Brad nodded. "And if Archmage thinks a fancy teleport spell is going to stop us, she's dead wrong." The fear and doubt that had paralyzed me earlier began to recede, replaced by a steely resolve. Archmage might have the upper hand for now, but we had something she didn't, the truth. And armed with that truth, I was ready to fight tooth and nail to honor my parents' memory and protect the world they died trying to save. Chapter 4. Brad, Agatha, and I walked through the corridors of the Institute for the Arcane Arts towards the High Witch's office with a secret that could shake the magical world to its core. The air was heavy with the fragrance of ancient books and wax, and mingling with the faint tang of magic, the kind of smell that stuck to your clothes. It was supposed to be a quick in-and-out deal, share what we knew about Archmage and bolt before anyone could say spell cast. As we walked toward Ingrid's office, my heart pounded with the knowledge of what we had recently uncovered, Archmage's whereabouts, and her leadership in the supernatural uprising movement. Brad and Agatha flanked me, their expressions as tense as mine. The corridors echoed with our footsteps, the overhead light blinking on the stone walls. As we neared the council meeting room, voices drifted towards us, growing louder with each step. My pulse accelerated, realizing we were about to overhear something we weren't meant to. This could be our chance to gather crucial intel, but the risk of getting caught made my palms sweat. "Hold on," I whispered, raising my hand. With a swift incantation, I cast a hasty invisibility spell, the familiar tingle of magic washing over us. Brad and Agatha shimmered and vanished from sight, and I felt myself fade into the background. The rush of power that came with casting always gave me a thrill, but this time it was tempered by the gravity of our situation. I couldn't help but wonder if my parents would be proud of me now, using my magic for something so important. Or would they be worried sick about the danger I was putting myself in? We edged closer to the door, careful not to make a sound. Through the slight crack, we could see Ingrid and Councilman Voss deep in conversation. The walls were dressed in tapestries and portraits. Behind a pillar, we found our hiding spot. I felt like a kid again, playing hide-and-seek, except the stakes were infinitely higher. One wrong move, one misplaced breath, and we'd be busted. Ingrid was all regal grace with her white hair flowing like a banner, stood apart with an aura that demanded respect. She didn't just wear power, she embodied it, like she was born to hold the world on her shoulders. Councilman Voss, on the other hand, was cut from a different cloth. Blue eyes sharp as ice chips, dark hair streaked with silver and slicked back with precision. He was a picture of control, his tailored suit like modern armor. But it was his smile that got me, the kind that never reached his eyes, a perfect facade covering something much darker. I'd always admired Ingrid's strength, but seeing her now, I felt a twinge of something new. Was it fear? Disappointment? The woman I'd looked up to suddenly seemed like a stranger. And Voss? Well, he'd always given me the creeps, but now his every gesture seemed loaded with sinister intent. The High Witch's voice was hushed. "Your carelessness could have cost us everything, Voss." I leaned in closer, desperate not to miss a word. "Please," Councilman Voss replied, his tone steaming with condescension. "You worry too much. The plans are perfection." Were they talking about the uprising? Plans that seemed to change with the wind or on Archmage's sudden whims? Ingrid grunted, her formality not quite masking her irritation. Holly Hellstorm. Did she just mention her sister? My mentor in league with Archmage? Or was there too much wax buildup in my ears? The shock hit me like a bucket of ice water. Ingrid, the High Witch, the woman I'd trusted and admired, was involved with Archmage. How long had this been going on? What did it mean for the magical community? For me? Change is the nature of our art, High Witch. Councilman Voss tilted his head in mock reverence. I glanced at where I knew Brad and Agatha were beside me, wishing I could see their reactions. Were they as floored as I was? As scared? Agatha hopped up onto my shoulder, her front paws resting on my collarbone. That's when I remembered the crystal ball nestled in my backpack, a tool to capture moments just like this. I eased the orb out, letting it hover before me, hidden by my cloaking magic. A few hushed words later, and the ball sparked to life, swirling with bluish energy, ready to record the venomous conversation before us. Holy hell, this was it. The moment of truth. My heart pounded so hard I was sure Brad and Agatha could hear it. I dreamed of uncovering some big conspiracy, but now that I was here, eavesdropping on Ingrid and Councilman Voss, I wished I could just go back to my house and curl up with a good spellbook. I knew I couldn't. I had to do this, for the magical community, for my parents' memory. They'd always taught me to stand up for what's right, even when it's scary. And boy was this scary. The crystal ball hummed softly, capturing every word. I held my breath, straining to hear more. Ingrid's voice dripped with disdain. Your arrogance will be our undoing, Voss. We must tread carefully. Careful? Ha! Councilman Voss scoffed. We have enough supporters eating out of our hands. Your sister's plan is flawless. This was getting weirder by the second. Flawless? Ingrid hissed. Need I remind you of the Holland girl? She's far too inquisitive for her own good. My stomach dropped. They were talking about me. Brad's hand found mine, squeezing gently. I could feel the tension radiating off him. Poor Brad, he'd only come along to help me with speaking with the High Witch. Now here we were, uncovering a huge magical conspiracy. I owed him big time after this. Maybe I'd enchant his drafting table to automatically sharpen his pencils or something. Councilman Voss waved dismissively. That little witch. Please. She's barely out of the academy. What threat could she possibly pose? Ouch. Talk about a blow to the ego. I might not be some centuries-old warlock, but I had skills. I thought about my magic, about the spells I'd created and the power I wielded. You underestimate her, Ingrid growled. She has a knack for sniffing out trouble. We need to keep her distracted. I bit my lip, fighting the urge to gasp. My own mentor, the woman I'd looked up to for years, was plotting against me. The betrayal stung like a slap to the face. All those late nights helping Ingrid with her paperwork, all the times I'd rushed across town to fetch her a specific magical ingredient, and this is how she repays me? Now I felt like an idiot for even trusting her. And how do you propose we do that? Councilman Voss drawled. Ingrid's lips curled into a cruel smile. We use her weakness. The boy. Brad stiffened beside me. Oh no. No. They couldn't mean Brad. My grip on his hand tightened. Ah yes. The architect, Councilman Voss mused. What was his name again? Brad? Bradley Adams, Ingrid confirmed. We'll use him as leverage. Keep Sage in line. I tried to separate them by invoking the Covenant of Veiled Boundaries, a primeval law that strictly forbids any romantic entanglements between members of the Council's inner circle, like Sage, and civilians like Brad. My blood ran cold. I wanted to scream, to rush in and confront them, but Brad's grip on my hand tightened, anchoring me in place. So that's why Ingrid had been so insistent on keeping Brad and me apart. It wasn't about some ancient law, or protecting the integrity of the magical community. It was all part of her scheme. The realization made me feel sick. Agatha's tail swished angrily. I always knew that old bat was a bitch, she hissed in my ear. I had to stifle a snort. Leave it to Agatha to sum up the situation so eloquently. Her blunt honesty was exactly what I needed right now, keeping me from spiraling into panic. Councilman Voss rocked on his heels, looking smug. And what of your sister, Acremage? Is she prepared for the next phase? Ingrid's face hardened. Archmages unpredictable, but she's committed to the cause. The supernatural uprising will proceed as planned. Good. Councilman Voss nodded. And the Echoing Locket? Safe, Ingrid assured him. Archmage has hidden where no one will think to look. My thoughts reeled. I had already guessed that the Echoing Locket, the mysterious amulet Archmage had created, was in her possession. But where she kept it, I had no clue. Councilman Voss nodded. Excellent. Soon Emberwick Crossing will be ours. And after that? Then the entire magical world, Ingrid finished, a wicked gleam in her expression. My stomach roiled and I felt sick. This was worse than I could have imagined. Not only was Ingrid involved, but she was at the heart of it all. My mentor, my friend. My heart clenched as I processed the enormity of their plan. I glanced at Brad, his jaw set in a hard line, anger radiating off him in waves. Agatha, resting on my shoulder, rubbed her furry cheek against mine. Ingrid cleared her throat. Speaking of leverage, I've been meaning to ask. How did you manage to dispose of Sage's parents so cleanly? Wasn't it you who orchestrated that little accident? I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. Holy hell. My breath caught in my throat, and a cold dread washed over me. This couldn't be happening. I'd always suspected foul play, but hearing it confirmed so casually, it was like another punch to the gut. Brad's grip on my hand tightened to the point of pain, but I barely noticed. The pain in my hand was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. My parents, gone because of these monsters. I wanted to scream, to unleash every ounce of magic I possessed and tear this room apart. But I couldn't. Not yet. We needed more information, and losing control now would only put us in danger. I bit my lip hard, tasting blood, using the sharp pain to ground myself. Councilman Voss chuckled, a sound that sent ice through me. Oh yes, it was. One of my finer moments, I must say. Those pesky Hollands were getting far too close to uncovering our plans. It was a simple matter to tamper with their car's brakes. A shame, really. They were quite talented. But your sister ordered their demise, and who am I to argue? The world tilted on its axis. I stumbled, and Brad caught me, steadying me with an arm around my waist. My blood boiled at Voss's casual cruelty. This man, this murderer, had been walking free all this time. How many council meetings had I attended, unknowingly sharing space with my parents' killer? The urge to vomit was overwhelming. I swallowed hard, forcing back the bile rising in my throat. But oh, how I longed to wipe that smug smile off Voss's face with a well-placed hex. You bastard, I whispered, the words lost in the invisibility spell. Agatha hissed, her fur standing on end. I'll claw his eyes out, she snarled softly. No insult could encompass the depth of my hatred for this man. I wanted to scream. Revenge would come, but not at the cost of exposing ourselves prematurely. Ingrid's lips curled in distaste. Must you be so crass about it, Voss? It was a necessary evil, nothing more. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. There was nothing necessary about murdering my parents. They were good people, kind people. And I hated these power-hungry sociopaths. The injustice of it all threatened to overwhelm me. Councilman Voss smirked. Come now, Ingrid. We're all friends here. No need for false modesty. You were the one who suggested we target them in the first place. I swayed. Even Agatha and Brad's comforting presence couldn't quell the storm of emotions raging inside me. Grief, rage, and a bone-deep weariness warred for dominance. Each new revelation was like a dagger to my heart. How could I have been so blind? I trusted her, respected her. Now, I wanted nothing more than to see her fall from her lofty perch. The High Witch's face hardened. On Archmage's orders. Let's not forget who truly pulls the strings here. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Archmage. The true mastermind behind it all. The one who had sentenced my parents to death. The scope of her evil was staggering. How many other families had she torn apart in her quest for power? Brad whispered, Sage, we need to get out of here. He was right, of course. Yet I shook my head minutely. We couldn't leave. Not yet. Not when we were finally getting answers. Knowledge was power, after all. And we'd need every scrap of power we could get if we hoped to bring down Archmage and her twisted cabal. Councilman Voss waved a hand dismissively. Yes, yes, all hail the great Archmage. But let's not sell ourselves short, High Witch. We're hardly powerless pawns in this battle for supremacy. Ingrid's nostrils flared. Watch yourself, Voss. Archmage doesn't suffer fools or traitors lightly. The High Witch's face flushed with anger. I serve Archmage faithfully. Unlike some, I know my place in the hierarchy. Councilman Voss laughed, the sound grating on my nerves. Oh, spare me the sanctimonious act. We both know you're itching to step out of your sister's shadow. Why else would you be so eager to keep that little protégé of yours under your thumb? Ingrid's eyes narrowed. Sage is none of your concern, Voss. I'll handle her as I see fit. Handle me? I mouthed, indignation rising in my chest. Brad squeezed my hand in warning, but I barely noticed. My heart and mind were distraught over everything I'd heard. My parents' murderer, standing mere feet away. The conspiracy larger and more insidious than I'd ever imagined. Holy hell, these two were like snakes in the grass, all hisses and hidden fangs. And Voss? His interest in my abilities was even more unsettling. Councilman Voss stroked his chin thoughtfully. You know, I've always wondered. Why did Archmage spare the girl? Surely it would have been simpler to eliminate the entire Holland family. Ingrid's lip curled. Archmage has her reasons. It's not our place to question them. Perhaps. Voss shrugged. Or perhaps she saw potential in young Sage. Unrestrained, untapped talent that could be molded to our purposes. Ingrid scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. Sage is hardly some secret weapon. She's a mediocre witch at best, useful only as a distraction and occasional errand girl. Her dismissive words stung more than I cared to admit. After everything I'd done to prove myself, to make her proud. Brad's arm tightened around me. Agatha pressed against my neck, her tail twitching in agitation. Councilman Voss raised an eyebrow. You underestimate her, Ingrid. I've seen her work. The girl has a skill for creative spellcasting that could prove quite useful in the right hands. Ingrid waved a hand dismissively. Parlor tricks and frivolous charms. Hardly the stuff of legend. But with proper guidance, well, let's just say I see potential where you see only mediocrity. Ingrid's eyes flashed dangerously. Are you questioning my judgment, Voss? He held up his hands in a placating gesture. Not at all. I'm merely suggesting that we keep our options open. After all, one can never have too many allies in a revolution, and you just seem overly fond of the girl. Ingrid's lips thinned. Sage's loyalty is not in question. I've made certain of that. Have you now? Councilman Voss's tone was sickeningly smug. And how, pray tell, did you manage that? A cruel smile played at the corners of Ingrid's mouth. By giving her exactly what she wanted, of course. A chance to prove herself. To be part of something greater, and I'm like a mother figure to her now. My stomach churned. All those late nights, the extra assignments, the constant push to improve, had it all been nothing more than manipulation? Councilman Voss snickered. Ah yes. The old carrot and stick approach. And I suppose young Bradley is the stick in this scenario? Ingrid's smile widened. Precisely. Sage is so desperate for approval, so eager to please. It's almost too easy. Dangle the promise of advancement before her, threaten to take away the boy she loves, she'll do anything I ask. Rage boiled within me, hot and fierce. How dare she? How dare she twist my feelings, my ambitions, into something so perverse? Brad's grip on my hand was almost painful now, but I welcomed the anchor. Without it, I might have done something foolish, like dropping the invisibility spell and confronting them then and there. Councilman Voss clapped his hands together. Well, well. It seems you have everything well in hand, Ingrid. I must say, I'm impressed. Perhaps Archmage was right to put her faith in you after all. Ingrid preened at the praise, but her eyes remained cold. Your approval means little to me, Voss. I serve Archmage and the cause. Nothing more. I'd come here seeking help, and I'd found only betrayal. My mentor, the woman I'd trusted and admired, revealed as a manipulative monster. And looming over it all, the shadowy figure of Archmage, the puppet master of this whole twisted plot. We couldn't stay here much longer. We had to get out, to process what we'd learned, to figure out our next move. They thought me weak, easily manipulated. The supernatural uprising jerks had no idea of the strength within me, the power I'd kept hidden all these years. Well, they were about to learn. I would bring their whole corrupt system crashing down around their ears. For my parents. For Brad. For myself. Let them underestimate me. Let them think me a lovesick girl, desperate for approval. I would use their arrogance against them, turn their own tricks back on them. The betrayal stung, a gaping wound in my chest. Beneath the pain, a fire was kindling. Ingrid, my mentor, the woman I'd trusted, was working with Archmage and Voss to overthrow everything. And they were using Brad against me. And now, armed with the truth and the evidence captured in my crystal ball, I was more dangerous than they could imagine. Once the dust settled, they would rue the day they ever crossed Sage Holland. Agatha's tail brushed against my leg, and I glanced down to see her looking up at me with fierce love. Brad leaned close, his breath cool against my ear. We need to get out of here now, he whispered urgently. I nodded, my heart hammering in my chest. But as I turned to leave, my elbow knocked against a nearby shelf. A small figurine toppled to the floor with a resounding crack. Ingrid and Councilman Voss whirled around, their faces masks of suspicion. What was that? Councilman Voss demanded, rising from his seat. Ingrid's hand glowed with black energy. We're not alone. Panic surged through me. I frantically reinforced the cloaking spell, praying it would hold. Show yourself, Ingrid commanded, her voice booming with authority. I held my breath, willing us to stay invisible, intangible, undetectable. Councilman Voss stalked towards our hiding spot behind the pillar, his nostrils flaring. I smell cat. Agatha bristled. How dare he, she hissed indignantly. Shush. I pleaded silently, my hand clamped over her furry mouth. Ingrid's hard gaze swept the room. Whoever you are, know this, your meddling ends now. The uprising cannot be stopped. Brad tugged on my arm, gesturing towards the door. I nodded, and we began to inch our way out, Agatha tucked safely in my arms. Just as we reached the threshold, Councilman Voss's hand shot out inches from Brad's face. Wait, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I sense magic. A spell. My heart nearly stopped. Had he detected us? Ingrid joined him, her fingers tracing intricate patterns in the air. Yes. Faint but there. A cloaking spell, perhaps? I silently cursed myself. Of course they'd be able to sense magic. How could I have been so careless? Reveal yourself, Ingrid commanded. Or face the consequences. I felt my cloaking spell begin to waver under the force of her will. Anxiety clawed at my throat. Brad squeezed my hand. I knew what he was asking. Should we run? But before I could decide, Agatha took matters into her own paws. With a yowl that would wake the dead, she leapt from my arms and darted between Ingrid and Councilman Voss's legs. What in the name of, Councilman Voss spluttered, stumbling backwards. Ingrid's concentration broke, her spell fizzling out. That blasted cat, she snarled. In the chaos, Brad and I slipped out the door. We sprinted down the corridor, not daring to look back. Smart cat, Brad said and panted. I nodded, too breathless to speak. We ducked into an alcove, pressing ourselves against the wall as footsteps thundered past. Find that cat. Ingrid's voice echoed through the halls. And search every inch of this building. Someone was listening, and I want to know who. When the coast was clear, Brad turned to me, his face pale. Sage, he whispered, what are we going to do? I clutched the crystal ball to my chest, its surface still swirling with captured secrets. We're going to stop them, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We have to. Brad nodded, his jaw set. Then let's kick some ass. I managed a weak smile. That's the plan. Agatha appeared, bolting past us, and we followed, running hard out of the castle and away from our enemies. I wasn't going down without a fight. And with my friends by my side, I felt invincible. Their reign of terror was about to meet its match in one seriously pissed-off interior designer with a prowess for creative spellcasting. Chapter 5. The brightly lit room was filled with shadows, the only sources of light coming from overhead chandeliers. The walls were adorned with intricate tapestries depicting mythical creatures and symbols, creating an aura of magic and mystery. This place gave me the creeps. It reminded me of those stuffy old libraries where you're afraid to breathe too loud. I half expected some cranky librarian to shush us any second. In the center of the room, a large wooden table stood, surrounded by 3 imposing figures. Brad and I could see the council sitting at the front of the room on a raised platform, their faces stern and stoic, their bodies adorned in flowing robes that seemed to shimmer with magic. Their eyes flickered with concern and inquisitiveness. These folks looked like they'd stepped right out of a fantasy novel, all regal and mysterious. I wondered if they practiced those stern expressions in the mirror every morning. The air was clotted with friction, causing the hairs on the back of Brad and my necks to stand on end. Whispers echoed off the stone walls like scurrying insects, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Holy hell, this was intense. I felt like I was in some kind of magical courtroom drama. All right, let's present our case and hope they understand, I said to Brad, who gave my hand a squeeze. His touch steadied me, reminding me why we were here. We had to expose the truth, no matter how scary it felt. I took a deep breath, channeling my inner confident witch. I faced the 3 council members. The first, High Chancellor Sauron, had piercing green eyes and a crown of silver hair that framed his severe expression. Beside him, Magister Eldrick, a broad-shouldered man with a beard as dark as night, exuded a quiet intensity. The last, Lady Morgana, was younger, with fiery red hair and a gaze that seemed to see right through me. Members of the council, I said, my voice carrying across the hushed room. We've got a serious dumpster fire on our hands. I lifted the crystal ball. And you're gonna want to see this. Okay, maybe not the most elegant way to start, but at least I had their attention. I could practically feel their curiosity radiating off them like heat from a bonfire. Brad nodded at me and then addressed the council with his usual empathetic tone. With respect, this evidence cannot be ignored. I triggered the crystal ball recording, an orb of memories and truth, and it sprang to life, projecting the holographic images of Councilman Voss and Ingrid, caught in candid treachery. They spoke of leading the supernatural uprising, their words weaving a tapestry of betrayal that hung heavy in the chamber. Watching the High Witch and Councilman Voss's faces in the crystal ball made my stomach churn. These were people we'd trusted, leaders of our community. And here they were, plotting to destroy everything we held dear. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. Since Archmage's disappearance, this uprising has been fermenting in the shadows, plotting to establish a regime where freedom is but a myth. I swept my arm across the room, gesturing to each council member. It's not just about power, it's about control, choking the life out of our world's diversity and magic. The council members shifted uneasily in their seats, exchanging worried glances. I hoped my words hit home. This wasn't just some petty disagreement, it was the future of our entire magical society at stake. And you have evidence of this and a betrayal? Asked High Chancellor Sauron, his voice sharp with disbelief. The Council's role as the governing body of the magical society has never faced such a dire threat. We've maintained balance for centuries, but this insurrection could topple everything we stand for. Be mindful, though, I said quickly. The crystal ball can only replay events it's witnessed once. After that, the memory fades, like a really expensive Snapchat. Magister Eldrick's fist slammed onto the table. Bring in Councilman Voss and High Witch Ingrid. The guards marched from the room, and we waited in tense silence. Minutes ticked by, each second stretching out unbearably. Brad and I exchanged worried glances as the tension in the room grew thicker. Finally, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor. The guards returned, their expressions grim and troubled. "They're not here," one guard reported, a hint of urgency in his voice. "We've searched the entire building and sent word to check their homes. It's as if they've vanished." The revelation sent a ripple of shock through the room. It was as if the earth had swallowed them whole, leaving behind only the echo of their conspiracy. A collective gasp rippled through the council members, their faces mirroring the growing concern. My heart sank. Of course they'd vanished. Why would anything in my life ever be simple? I should have known better than to hope for an easy resolution. Vanished. I could feel Brad's hand tighten around mine. "That sucks." "Highly," Brad agreed, eyebrows knitting together. The council members exchanged worried glances, the severity of the situation sinking in. Magister Eldrick turned back to us, his expression hardening. "We need to act swiftly. This insurrection must be stopped before it can gain more power." Holy hell, this was really happening. The supernatural uprising we'd been dreading was finally here, and it felt like a punch to the gut. I'd always known Ingrid and Voss were shady, but this was next-level villainy. "Impossible," declared High Chancellor Sauron, his disbelief mirroring our own shock. "They were under constant surveillance." "Yeah, right. As if constant surveillance ever stopped anyone determined enough. These weren't amateurs we were dealing with. They were powerful, cunning, and apparently way better at keeping secrets than we'd given them credit for. Unless," I said slowly, piecing it together, "they somehow knew they were about to be exposed and bolted. This whole thing reeks worse than month-old gym socks." The pieces were falling into place in my mind, each revelation more unsettling than the last. How long had they been planning this? Had we really been that blind, or were they just that good at deception? "I wholeheartedly agree, Miss Holland," Magister Eldrick said stiffly. "Councilman Voss's cunning is matched only by his ambition for power. And Ingrid, her visions have always hinted at darker aspirations." No kidding. Voss had always given me the creeps, but Ingrid, she was supposed to be one of us. The betrayal stung, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. I wondered if there was still some good in her, buried beneath all that ambition. "Whatever their reasons," Brad said, his voice a calm counterpoint to the rising panic, "we must act swiftly. This is bigger than any one of us." Brad's steadiness grounded me, reminding me why I'd fallen for him in the first place. But our forbidden romance seemed trivial now, compared to the looming threat. As the reality of the situation seeped into the room like a cold draft, the council members, High Chancellor Sauron, Magister Eldrick, and Lady Morgana, exchanged grave looks, and I felt the urgency pressing down upon us all. I thought of my parents, wondering what they would do in this situation. Would they be proud of me, standing here among the most powerful witches and warlocks in Emberwick Crossing? Or would they be terrified for my safety? The ache of their absence hit me anew, and I wished more than ever for their guidance. Giving up wasn't an option. We had to fight, had to find a way to stop this insurrection before it destroyed everything. "Is there anything more?" Lady Morgana said. I shifted under Brad's supportive gaze and took a deep breath. "Actually, there is one more thing. It's about the covenant of veiled boundaries." My palms were sweaty and my heart thundered in my chest. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating for weeks. The council's faces swam before me, a sea of stern expressions and raised eyebrows. I swallowed hard, trying to quell the nervous energy bubbling up inside me. What if they laughed? What if they dismissed me outright? No. I had to do this. For Brad. For us. For every witch and warlock who'd ever fallen for someone they weren't supposed to. The council members leaned forward, their expressions sharp. This archaic rule had long been a thorn in my side, and now it was time to challenge it. My hands clenched at my sides. "Look, this law, it's ancient and it's unfair. It keeps people like me from being with, well, people like Brad." I gestured towards him. I could feel Brad's presence beside me, solid and reassuring. His warmth gave me strength even as doubt gnawed at my insides. The council's piercing gazes made me want to shrink away, to dissolve into the floor. But I stood my ground. I had to. This wasn't just about me and Brad anymore. It was about challenging an outdated system, about pushing for change in a world that desperately needed it. High Chancellor Soren's posture stiffened. I understand that, Miss Holland, and the Covenant serves to prevent distractions and conflicts of interest within our ranks. Of course they'd fall back on the old excuses. But I wasn't about to let them off that easily. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what came next. The words I'd rehearsed 100 times in my head threatened to jumble together, but I forced them out anyway. I stood before the council table. But that's just it. Who says love is a distraction? Holy hell, I'd argue it makes us stronger. And if we're facing an uprising, don't you think we need all the strength we can get? My voice sounded high and shrill. I winced inwardly but kept my chin up. No backing down now. I'd come too far, risked too much. The memory of all those stolen moments with Brad, all the times we'd had to hide our feelings, fueled my determination. We deserved better. We all did. Brad stepped up beside me. Council members, our friendship has only ever inspired our dedication to protect this community, and we're in love. At least I know I am. My breath caught in my throat. Brad's words sent a rush of warmth through me, momentarily drowning out my anxiety. He loved me. He'd said it out loud, in front of everyone. I wanted to turn to him, to throw my arms around him and never let go, but I couldn't. Not yet. Magister Eldrick stroked his beard thoughtfully. We must consider the implications. The Covenant was established for a reason. I bit back a frustrated groan. Always with the implications, the reasons, the excuses. Couldn't they see that the world was changing? That we needed to change with it? I took another deep breath, trying to channel my frustration into something more productive. I couldn't lose my cool now, not when we were so close. I leaned forward, sensing their hesitation. Times change. And so should we. If we cling to outdated traditions, how are we any better than those who seek to overthrow us? There was a moment of silence, heavy with contemplation. I held my breath, searching their faces for any sign of agreement. The silence stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. My legs trembled beneath me, but I refused to show weakness. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. Lady Morgana's shoulders relaxed. Perhaps it is time we reevaluate some of our more antiquated regulations. A glimmer of hope sparked in my chest. Were they actually considering it? I wanted to cheer, to jump up and down, but I forced myself to remain still. The suspense was killing me, making my skin prickle with nervous energy. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, the council members exchanged glances. High Chancellor Soren's chin lifted. The law shall be revoked. Your relationship with Mr. Adams will no longer be governed by the covenant of veiled boundaries. Relief washed over me like a cleansing rain. Thank you. Brad took me hand and squeezed. I couldn't believe it. We'd done it. Actually done it. The urge to pinch myself was almost overwhelming. This had to be a dream, right? But no, Brad's hand in mine was real, solid, anchoring me to this moment. We were free. Finally, truly free to be together. The implications of what we'd just accomplished hit me all at once, leaving me dizzy with joy and disbelief. We thanked the council members, and then we burst out of the council chambers, giddy with victory. Brad's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining as we strolled through the sunny streets of Emberwick Crossing towards our homes. My heart raced from the electricity of his touch. Holy crap, we did it. The council actually listened to us. I couldn't believe it. After all those nights of worrying and planning, it felt surreal to walk hand in hand with Brad in broad daylight. No more hiding, no more stolen glances. My chest swelled with a mix of relief and excitement. I wanted to skip down the street, to shout from the rooftops that Brad was mine. But I settled for squeezing his hand tighter, relishing the warmth of his skin against mine. I thought of my parents, wondering if they'd be proud of the witch I'd become. Would they approve of the risks I'd taken for love? Of the stand I was about to take against dark forces threatening our world? I hoped so. At my doorstep, I pushed it open, noticing the unusual quiet. The silence was eerie. No snarky comments, no judgmental meows. And I was glad, since I had other plans that didn't involve a sarcastic feline audience. Agatha must be out terrorizing the local bird population again, I said, stepping inside. Brad chuckled, following me in. Or plotting world domination. You never know with that cat. The house felt different without Agatha's judgy stares, but I couldn't complain. Alone time with Brad? Holy hell, yes please. We'd been alone before, sure, but this was different. No more looking over our shoulders, no more guilt. Just us, finally free to be together. I struggled to keep my cool, to not jump into his arms right then and there. Can you believe it? Brad's voice was low, filled with wonder. We actually did it. The council denounced the covenant. His arms snaked around my waist, pulling me close. I leaned back, savoring his warmth. No more sneaking around. No more pretending. Gods, his arms felt good. Strong, secure. I dreamed of this moment for so long, imagined it 1,000 different ways. No more pretending, he echoed, his breath tickling my ear. We were free. Actually, truly free to be together. I turned in his arms, drinking in the sight of him. Spiky hair I'd always wanted to run my fingers through. That crooked smile that made my knees weak. How many times had I stopped myself from touching him like this? From really looking at him, memorizing every detail. Too many to count. But now I could stare all I wanted. Touch all I wanted. The realization hit me like a tidal wave of happiness. Brad, I whispered, I love you. Have since we were kids, flinging spells in the backyard and dreaming of being great witches. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Not that I wanted to. They'd been bottled up for so long, aching to be said. And now that they were out there, hanging in the air between us, I felt lighter. Freer. Like I could finally breathe after holding my breath for months. Brad's lips crashed into mine, longing poured into a single, electrifying kiss. My fingers tangled in his hair. His hands roamed my back, leaving trails of fire in their wake. Each kiss deepened as we fondled and caressed, lost in the moment we'd both craved for so long. Holy hellfires, the man could kiss. It was like every cheesy romance novel come to life, but better. Because this was real. This was us. No more fantasizing about what it would be like. No more stolen pecks in dark corners. This was Brad here now, kissing me like his life depended on it. And I was right there with him, pouring months of pent-up love and desire into every touch. I melted into his embrace, enjoying the delicious heat of his body against mine. His touch made my skin come alive, igniting a passion I'd never felt before. The smell of his cologne, sandalwood and citrus, filled my senses and made my head spin. Sage, Brad whispered, his voice husky with desire. Damn, you're a good kisser. I pulled back, drinking in the sight of his flushed cheeks and swollen lips. You are too, Bradley. Holy hell, we are finally free to be a couple now. We should have spoken to the council sooner. Why did we wait so long? The question nagged at me. All that time wasted, tiptoeing around our feelings. But then again, maybe we needed that time. To grow, to be sure. To make this moment all the sweeter. He chuckled, the sound sending pleasant vibrations through my body. Because we're both idiots. Idiot or not, he was my idiot now. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Speak for yourself, I teased, leaning in for another kiss. This time it was slower, more deliberate. Brad's lips moved against mine with a tenderness that made my heart ache. His hands cupped my face, thumbs caressing my cheeks as if I were something precious. I sighed contentedly, pressing myself closer to him. My hand slid down his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath my palm. It matched the frantic rhythm of my own, a surge of desire and affection. Brad's kisses trailed along my jaw, then down my neck. I tilted my head, giving him better access, as I gasped at the sensation. "Brad," I breathed, my fingers digging into his shoulders. He nipped at my collarbone, then soothed the spot with his tongue. "You're so beautiful, Sage. So perfect." I pulled his face back to mine, capturing his lips in another fiery kiss. Our tongues were exploring and tasting. I reveled in the way he tasted, like mint ice cream. My hand slid under his shirt, caressing the defined muscles of his back. Brad groaned, the sound sending a vibration of lusty desire through me. His own hand slipped beneath my top, calloused fingers leaving goosebumps on my exposed skin. We broke apart, both panting heavily. Brad rested his forehead against mine, his breath warm on my face. "I love you, Sage," he said softly, his gaze intense and full of emotion. "I've loved you for years. And I can't stop saying it, I love you." My heart soared at his words. I cupped his cheek, my thumb brushing over his lips. "I love you too. More than I can say." His answering smile was radiant, lighting up his entire face. He pulled me close again, this kiss softer but no less passionate. It was a promise, a declaration, a beginning. When we finally parted, I couldn't stop smiling. Brad's hair was mussed from my fingers, his lips swollen from our kisses. He still looked utterly kissable, and I had to resist the urge to pull him back in for more making out. "So," Brad said, a glint in his eye. "What happens now?" I grinned, running my hands down his arms. "Well, Mr. Magical Architect, I think we have some exploring to do." The thrill of possibilities zipped through me. After all the rules and restrictions, we were finally free to be together. The covenant of veiled boundaries had loomed over us for so long, casting shadows on our relationship. But now we could step into the light, hand in hand, without fear of repercussions. "Is that so?" He raised an eyebrow, his hand settling on my hips. I hummed, pressing a quick kiss to the corner of his mouth. "And I can't wait to start." "God, Sage," he murmured against my lips. "I never thought." "Me neither," I cut in, grinning even wider. He laughed, the sound sending butterflies dancing in my stomach. "Just two rebels with a supernatural uprising cause." "Two rebels in love," I corrected, pulling him in for another kiss. Love. The word tasted like honey on my tongue. It was a balm to all the fears and doubts that had plagued us. We still had a world of trouble ahead, but right now, in this moment, everything felt possible. "You're incredible, you know that? Brilliant, beautiful, and brave as hell." I felt my cheeks flush at his words. "Flatterer," I teased. I wondered if he knew just how much his words meant to me, how they bolstered my confidence when I needed it most. "It's not flattery if it's true. You stood up to the council, Sage. You changed centuries of magical law. All because you believed in us. We did it together," I reminded him. "You and me against the world now." Brad's smile widened. I liked the sound of that. His words echoed my thoughts, and I felt a surge of determination. We were a team now, officially and irrevocably. As we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, I knew I loved Brad so much that I'd never let anyone stand in our way of being together again. Now, I just a supernatural apocalypse to stop. I was Sage Holland, spell creator extraordinaire, with a talent for crystal ball scrying and a flair for magical interior design. I'd face loss, loneliness, and an outdated magical bureaucracy. A supernatural uprising? Bring it on. Chapter 6. This derelict area of Emberwick Crossing was run down and dilapidated, with broken windows and graffiti covering the walls. The abandoned buildings and overgrown foliage covered everything in thick vines and weeds. The afternoon sun beat down on the cracked pavement. Dark and foreboding shadows lined the alleys, as if it was warning us of the danger ahead. In the distance, a large, looming structure stood tall, the abandoned lab of the Dark Witch Archmage. I lead 23 members of the magical community, including Agatha, Evie, and my boyfriend Brad. Holly hell, I loved calling him my boyfriend. But right now I had to focus. We were here to confront Archmage once and for all. I hope this surprise assault on Archmage works, I said, a charged magical current running through my veins. Brad squeezed my hand, his blue eyes steadfast. We trust you, Sage. If anyone can pull off an unprecedented attack, it's you. Evie tossed her black hair over her shoulder, giving me a grin. And if things go belly up, I've got potions that'll turn the lot of us into squirrels. Quick getaway. Agatha sat atop my shoulder, her yellow eyes glinting. Charming optimism, Evie. But let's not hedge our bets on turning tail. As we neared the lab, a chill crept over my skin. Guarding the entrance stood 6 stone gargoyles, their eyes glowing with a sinister red light. I felt the thrum of dark magic in the air. I tilted my head, my gaze zeroing in on the crystals dangling from necklaces around their stony necks. Those necklaces. They're the source of their animation. Distraction, then destruction. Evie reached inside her pouch strapped to her belt, and then uncorked a vial filled with shimmering liquid and tossed it at the feet of the nearest gargoyle. As it erupted into a cloud of glittering mist, the creature's head swung around, momentarily transfixed. The other magical resident stood back and watched. Brad rubbed his hands together, calling forth his magic. Time to loosen those necklaces. His hands glowed with an amber hue as his magic worked through the stone structure. Go, I urged. Brad sprang forward, manipulating the stone with deft precision. The gargoyle's grip on its crystal necklace slackened. I darted between claws and snapping jaws, everything narrowing to the pulse of the crystal in my grasp. With a surge of willpower, I channeled my energy into my palm. The crystal cracked, its light extinguished. I darted between stone claws and snapping jaws, the world narrowing to the pulse of the crystal in my grasp. With a surge of will, I channeled my energy into the palm of my hand, and the crystal cracked, its light extinguished. Left flank, Sage. Don't dilly-dally. Agatha said. I nodded, pivoting just in time to see Brad shatter another crystal. Cover me. I called out as I lunged for another gargoyle. Evie retaliated by throwing another vial at a different guardian. The liquid exploded into a dazzling haze that swirled around the creature's head like confetti at a parade gone wrong. That's it. Keep him disoriented. Agatha melded into shadow, darting between our adversaries like a phantom. She emerged behind one gargoyle and swatted at its necklace with her paw, causing it to swing precariously. Sage. A little help here? Brad's voice was strained as he wrestled with a particularly stubborn guardian. I waved my hand in intricate patterns while murmuring an incantation under my breath. A burst of energy shot forth and struck the necklace on Brad's foe. It shattered into fragments that scattered like fallen stars. Another one down. Brad hollered. One of the gargoyles lunged at Evie. She barely had time to react before it closed in on her, but managed to pull out another vial and smashed it on its foot. The liquid glowed bright green and sprouted vines that wrapped around its limbs. Don't you just love nature's fury? Evie winked as she dodged its snapping jaws. Brad summoned more magic, molding stone beneath his fingers like clay until yet another crystal came loose and clattered to the ground. That makes 4 if anyone's keeping score. Did you think this was some kind of game? Agatha quipped while batting away at another necklace with surprising agility for a cat. Always so serious, Evie remarked, distracted by yet another blast from her pouch as she tossed it toward an encroaching gargoyle. Ducking under a massive stone claw, I grabbed hold of one more necklace and poured all my energy into breaking it apart. My strength melded with the crystal until it cracked and dimmed. That's 5. The remaining gargoyle roared in defiance, but was quickly subdued by our combined efforts. A final vial from Evie erupted in its face while Brad manipulated its joints until it could no longer move freely. And their threat was reduced to mere sculptures once again. Nice work. Brad panted heavily. Evie punched him lightly on the shoulder. I'd say we make quite the team when we're not bickering over potion ingredients. I'd prefer less excitement next time. Agatha reappeared from shadow form beside me and licked her paw nonchalantly. Let's keep moving, I said, adrenaline singing in my veins. Archmage won't wait for us to catch our breath. We pushed forward, further into the abandoned section of the city, the sun high in the cloudless blue sky. We advanced through the overgrown foliage towards Archmage's lab, each step resounded with a sense of foreboding. As we neared the trees, their branches seemed to turn against us, twisting into monstrous shapes, and deadly vines reaching out like serpents poised to strike. The foliage attacked our group. The sight of nature turning against us made my hands clench. I'd always found solace in the forest, but now it felt like a disloyalty. Archmage's influence had corrupted even the most innocent of things. Anger flashed through me. Figures she'd animate the greenery, I said. I watched as the 20 residents who had volunteered to help us take down Acremage, Councilman Voss and the High Witch, used their magic and staffs to fight the foliage with various incantations. The sound of spells clashing against nature gone wild filled the air. I felt a twinge of pride for our makeshift army. These were ordinary witches and warlocks, stepping up to face extraordinary danger. Their bravery bolstered my own resolve. Evie threw a shimmering concoction that turned the thorns sprouting from a vine into harmless dandelion fluff before they could impale anyone. Careful. Agatha's form melded into my shadow. Watch it, young witch. Your left. I whipped around, casting a shield just in time to deflect a swinging branch. Brad was beside me, and his hands shaped invisible blocks of force, constructing barriers to protect our group. My heart hammered. I realized how close that branch had come. Agatha's warning had saved me from a nasty blow. My muscles strained. Keep pushing through. We carved a path toward the lab, the sound of battle outside receding as we entered the darkened threshold. Inside, the air was stagnant and leaden with the noxious smell of old magic and dust. The sudden quiet was unnerving. The lab's interior felt like a tomb, preserved in time since Archmage's disappearance. I had the bad feeling that we were disturbing something that should have remained buried. But we had no choice. The fate of our community hung in the balance. Agatha's tail twitched. Trap ahead. I took the lead down the hall that opened into a large chamber. Everyone, stay alert. My breath caught as I spotted it, a room clouded with swirling noxious gas. I'd heard whispers of Archmage's experiments, but seeing the evidence firsthand was chilling. How many innocent magical beings had suffered for her twisted ambitions? Evie peered over my shoulder. Archmage has been busy. I heard she's studied ancient alchemical texts. This brew targets magical beings specifically. Nasty stuff. I grimaced. This is annoying. Brad's face etched with concern. Can you clear it? I focused on the currents around us. Air manipulation. Brad, we'll need your shields too. This was what I'd trained for, creating new spells on the fly, adapting to impossible situations. Brad stepped forward. Right behind you. Agatha leapt gracefully onto my shoulder, digging her claws in slightly for purchase. Don't get any ideas about making this a permanent arrangement. I smirked. Wouldn't dream of it. My expression turned serious. Ready? Evie gripped my free hand. Let's do it. Brad took my other, and together we formed an unbreakable chain. As our hands connected, I felt a surge of energy. It wasn't just magic, it was trust, friendship, and shared purpose. Momentarily, my doubts faded away. We might be outnumbered and outgunned, but we had something Archmage and her cohorts could never understand: genuine friendships forged through loyalty and love. I closed my eyes, calling upon my power over the elements. Air swirled at my command, rushing to create a sphere of breathable space amidst the poison. Simultaneously, Brad's magic surged, reinforcing the bubble with a lattice of protective energy. Move, I instructed, and we stepped forward into the haze. Feels like walking through a swamp, Evie coughed, the pressure of the gas pressing against our makeshift barrier. Keep going, Brad urged, his voice steady even as his brow furrowed in concentration. We shuffled through the toxic cloud, every step a testament to our will and combined strength. Finally, we emerged on the other side, gasping for the cleaner air of the following chamber. Nice work, Brad exhaled, releasing my hand. But don't relax yet. Archmage isn't one for easy paths. Who needs easy when you've got ingenuity and good company? I quipped, trying to lighten the mood as I brushed off Agatha from my shoulder. Speak for yourself, Agatha grumbled, but there was a hint of relief in her tone. The next room was dimly lit, shadows dancing across the walls, creating an eerie atmosphere. It didn't take long to realize this wasn't just poor lighting. Illusions flickered in and out of existence, disorienting and surreal. Brad was squinting as he tried to discern reality from mirage. Archmage has harnessed ancient illusion spells. From forgotten realms, no less. This is a devious nightmare. With a deep breath, I drew on my magic to see beyond the deception. Hidden within the deception, a pattern emerged, a sequence of symbols acting as breadcrumbs through the illusions. Agatha, your instincts are sharp, even sharper than her illusions. And Brad, use that analytical mind of yours. Evie, stay close. We need to decode these symbols, I instructed, pointing towards the shifting images. Evie nodded, her gaze sharpening. Between the four of us, we've got this. Brad identified the first symbol, and we followed the pattern he traced with his finger. Next one's there. I stepped carefully to align with the symbol that pulsed faintly under my gaze. Got another one. Evie pointed. 2 more to go, young witch. Agatha rubbed her cheek against my chin. Methodically, we decoded the sequence until we reached the far side of the room, untouched by the illusion's dizzying effects. I blew out a breath, a smile on my lips. Now let's find Archmage and the Echoing Locket. The door to Archmage's lab creaked open, revealing a scene that was both fascinating and sinister. Shelves lined with spell components and ancient tomes surrounded us, but it was the woman at the center of the room who commanded our attention. Archmage Nightspire stood before an altar, the Echoing Locket clasped tightly in her pale hand, its surface pulsing with captured spells. Archmage, I called out, my voice steady despite the unease knotting my stomach. This ends now. Ah, Sage Holland, she replied, her tone smooth as ice, do you really believe you can stop me? I could feel the energy coursing through me, the air around me thrumming. Actually, yes. We're not playing by your rules anymore. Brad stepped forward. You're outnumbered, and we're not backing down. Outnumbered perhaps, Archmage said coolly, but outmatched? Hardly. Evie's hand found mine, squeezing it briefly before she flung a vial to the ground. A thick purple fog rolled across the floor, obscuring our vision but more importantly, disrupting Archmage's concentration. Archmage narrowed her gaze and extended her free hand. Crackling energy surged from her fingertips, aiming to dispel the fog. Pathetic tricks, she muttered. Shadow bind. Agatha hissed, leaping from my shoulder. The room dimmed further as tendrils of darkness coiled around Archmage, eliciting a snarl of frustration from her. She twirled with surprising agility, manipulating the shadows to constrict and then snap back at Agatha. Enough. She flicked her wrist sharply. Agatha yelped and retreated but remained vigilant. Try this on for size. Brad shouted, his hands moving swiftly as he conjured a lattice of glowing runes around Archmage, each one designed to disarm and disorient. She glared at Brad without losing focus on dissolving his runes with delicate precision. Runes? She smirked. Child's play. I focused all my power, feeling the elemental magic at my fingertips responding to my will. With a flick of my hand, I sent a gust of wind toward the locket, attempting to wrench it from Archmage's grasp. Persistent, aren't you? Her voice wavered slightly as she reinforced her grip on the locket with an incantation. Lightning flickered around her as she struggled to maintain control. Holy hell, I muttered. She was tougher than we anticipated. Brad slammed his foot into the ground and stone spikes erupted beneath Archmage's feet. She jumped nimbly aside but stumbled as one caught her ankle. I don't need spells to deal with amateurs. Her voice broke into a shout. Evie's fingers danced in complex motions as she prepared another elixir. Sage. Now. Drawing upon my magical energy, I thrust both hands forward and unleashed a torrent of magic aimed directly at Archmage's defenses. She winced but held firm against our combined assault. You think you can beat me? The icy composure cracked in her voice. We think we already have, Brad replied calmly. Archmage managed to maintain her grip, but her voice had lost some of its composure. But I've planned for every contingency. Did you plan for this? I said, weaving together a new spell, the product of countless sleepless nights. It was untested, but I trusted my instincts. Forming a complex pattern with my hands, I channeled pure creative energy into the air. A radiant lattice of spellwork coiled around Archmage, tightening like an ethereal serpent. She gasped, a flicker of fear rippling across her otherwise impassive face, as the lattice started to unravel her defenses piece by piece. Impossible, she hissed through clenched teeth. Hate to break it to you, I said, feeling a surge of confidence. But this spell rewrites your contingencies. The Dark Witch struggled against the luminescent bonds, her movements becoming frantic. As the magic took hold, the ground beneath us thrummed with power. Her expression morphed from disbelief to sheer rage. I will not be undone by the likes of you, Archmage spat. Funny, Brad said, stepping closer. Looks like you already are. I had to hand it to Brad, his one-liners were on point tonight. Maybe I should start taking notes. Archmage's final barrier cracked audibly, before shattering completely under the weight of my spell. Her defiance faded into frantic desperation as she tried to summon more energy but found none left to conjure. You've underestimated us, I said quietly. My friends and I were like the magical Avengers, minus the cool outfits and billion-dollar budget. Her response was a guttural growl of frustration, but for the first time since this all began, it sounded more like surrender than defiance. Agatha purred from the shadows. Let's wrap this up. My dinner time is sacred and I hate being late. Ah, Agatha. Always keeping our priorities straight. Who needs to save the world when there's a can of tuna waiting at home? Always about your stomach, Agatha? Evie said, lobbing another potion that exploded into a dazzling display of light and sound, momentarily stunning Archmage. With a cruel smile, Archmage vanished into thin air, taking the Echoing Locket with her. Her laughter echoed from the walls, mocking us even in her retreat. Just when I thought we had her. Typical villain move, always ruining a perfectly good climax with their disappearing acts. I frowned. Damn it. She got away. The air sizzled with dark energy, and Councilman Voss teleported before us, his face twisted in fury. Meddling children, he spat, his voice dripping with condescension. Do you have any idea what you've done? Voss roared, raising his hand to unleash a torrent of magical energy. Shield up. Brad yelled, throwing up a barrier just in time to absorb the brunt of the attack. Evie, I need those potions now. Agatha, shadows, blind him if you can. I called out, drawing on every ounce of strength left in me. Nothing like a little teamwork to really bring out the best in people. Or cats, in Agatha's case. You're being bossy, young witch. Agatha darted through the room like a wraith, her shadowy form a blur. Here, catch. Evie tossed a handful of vials that exploded around Councilman Voss, releasing clouds of smoke and bursts of light that caused him to stagger. Let's see how you like being trapped. Brad growled, and he constructed an intricate maze of magical walls around Voss. Brad's architectural skills never ceased to amaze me. Your tricks won't hold me forever. Councilman Voss bellowed, struggling against the constraints. With a determined expression, Brad manipulated the stone beneath Voss's feet. Cracks began to form rapidly before spiraling into a jagged pit that consumed Voss up to his waist. Brad didn't relent. My boyfriend condensed the stone around Councilman Voss like a vice, crushing and suffocating the warlock's fire spells until his cries turned into weak gasps. Blood gurgled up and out of his mouth. Is this the part where you beg for mercy? Agatha circled the trapped councilman, her yellow stare keen. Voss coughed, his voice little more than a whisper now. No, but Sage, I must confess something. Confess what? I watched him struggle for each shallow breath. It was me. He drew in a ragged gulp of air. I killed your parents because of Ingrid. His blue eyes, ice cold and remorseless even now, met mine. I stared at Voss, my mind reeling from his confession. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, and I struggled to breathe. You what? My voice came out as a strangled whisper. Voss coughed, blood splattering his chin. Ingrid, I loved her. I did it for her, even though I know she never loved me back. Your parents, they were in the way. Rage surged through me, hot and violent. You monster! I lunged forward, but Brad caught me, holding me back. Let me go. I thrashed against his grip. I'll kill him myself. Sage, don't, Brad said, his voice pained. He's not worth it. Agatha prowled closer to Voss, her tail lashing. Well, well. The truth comes out at last. How deliciously tragic. Evie knelt beside me, her face a mask of concern. Sage, I'm so sorry, but at least you know the full truth now. Councilman Voss wheezed, his breaths growing more labored. Ingrid, I did it, all for her. You took everything from me, I snarled, tears streaming down my face. And for what? A woman who never loved you back? Love makes fools of us all, Voss gasped, a bitter smile twisting his bloodied lips. I wrenched free from Brad's grasp, stumbling towards Voss. Tell me why. Why them? Why not just? Your father was going to expose Ingrid's plans, Voss rasped. Your mother, collateral damage. I sobbed, my voice rising hysterically. She was a person. They both were. Agatha's fur bristled. Young witch, step back. Let the bastard die in peace. I whirled on her. He doesn't deserve peace. No, Voss agreed, his voice fading. I don't. But I'm sorry. For what it's worth. I laughed bitterly. It's worth nothing. The councilman's gaze grew distant, unfocused. Tell Ingrid I always loved her. Even now. With a final, rattling breath, Councilman Alden Voss slumped in his stone prison. The light faded from his gaze, leaving behind empty, glassy orbs staring at nothing. I stumbled back, my legs giving out. Brad caught me, lowering us both to the ground. He's gone. Evie checked Voss's pulse. His life is over. But it wasn't over. Not for me. The truth of my parents' deaths, hidden for so long, now lay exposed like a raw nerve. I curled into Brad's chest, sobs racking my body. Shish, I've got you, Brad murmured, stroking my hair. Let it out, Sage. I'm here. Evie knelt beside us, wrapping her arms around us both. We're all here, Sage. You're not alone. Agatha padded over. Well, this is a fine mess. What now, young witch? I lifted my head, wiping my tears. Now. We find Ingrid. And we make her pay. Brad tensed. Sage, revenge won't bring them back. I know that, I snapped, then softened. I'm sorry. Evie squeezed my hand. And we'll get justice for their deaths. Agatha snorted. How heartwarming. Now, can we please get out of this dreary lab? The stench of death is ruining my appetite. Through the sniffles and tears, I found myself laughing. It was a broken, hysterical sound, but it was something. Only you could think about food at a time like this, I said, shaking my head. Agatha preened. What can I say? I'm a cat of simple pleasures. Brad helped me to my feet, his arms steady around my waist. Come on. Let's get out of here. As we made our way out of the Archmage's lab, leaving Voss's body behind, Ingrid was still out there, and now I knew the truth about her involvement in my parents' deaths. Agatha trotted ahead, her tail held high. Now about that food. I rolled my eyes, grateful for the distraction. You're incorrigible. I prefer charmingly persistent. Agatha lifted her chin. Outside, the enchanted foliage writhed and twisted around the magical residence, fighting valiantly. I closed my eyes for a moment, reaching deep within. Folium cessare. I chanted, my hands weaving a new pattern in the air. A pulse of clear energy radiated out from me, calming the violent greenery until it lay dormant at our feet. Archmage has fled, but this isn't over, I declared, turning to face the crowd. Their cheers and applause warmed me, but the ache in my heart remained. Everyone left the lab and headed back towards our homes. I can't believe it, I murmured as we walked. All this time, Voss was their killer. So what's the plan? Evie asked, her voice tentative. I squared my shoulders. We find Ingrid. And her psychopath, crazy sister. Agatha looked up at me. Sage, are you sure that's wise? Those two are dangerous. I know, I said, my voice hardening. But so am I. Agatha chuckled darkly. Now that's what I like to hear. A little revenge never hurt anyone. Except, the person being revenged upon, Evie pointed out. I shook my head. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. For my parents, and for anyone else Ingrid and Archmage have hurt. Brad sighed but nodded. All right. But we do this smart. No rushing and half-cocked. Okay, yeah, I said, then smiled. As we made our way back to my house, I felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. Grief, anger, determination, and underneath it all, a fierce love for the makeshift family surrounding me. Thank you, I said softly. All of you. I couldn't do this without you. Evie squeezed my arm. That's what friends are for, bestie. Brad kissed the top of my head. You're my everything, Sage. And I won't let you do this alone. Agatha, predictably, ruined the moment. Yes, we're all very devoted. Now about that food. I laughed. Fine, you glutton feline. We'll stop for takeout on the way home. As we walked, I felt a transformation within me. Something had changed today, beyond just learning the truth about my parents. I'd always known I was strong, but now I felt dangerous. Ingrid had no idea what was coming for her. And neither did Archmage. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were going to take them down, and we were going to do it soon. Well, plus one very demanding cat. If you don't feed me soon, I may have to resort to cannibalism, Agatha announced dramatically. I rolled my eyes. You're a cat. Technically, that would be human ableism. Whatever. Agatha sniffed. We rounded the corner, and the sight of our favorite takeout place came into view. For a weird moment, everything felt normal again. But I knew better. Nothing would ever be normal again. And strangely, I was okay with that. Because normal had never included justice for my parents. And now, finally, I had a chance to get it. Watch out, Ingrid. I'm coming for you. Chapter 7. The forest had swallowed the evening sun, casting elongated shadows that on the pine-strewn ground. It was the perfect hideout, an old ruin, its stones cracked and covered in ivy. The air buzzed with magic, thick and potent. With me were Evie, Freya, Professor Elderwood, and Brad for the final showdown with Ingrid and her sister Archmage. This was it. The moment we'd been preparing for. My palms were slick with sweat, and my heart pounded in my chest. But I couldn't let fear take over. Not now. I had to be strong, for my parents, for my friends, for all of Emberwick Crossing. The fate of our magical community rested on what happened here tonight. I tucked a blue-streaked lock behind my ear. Freya, Rowan, thanks for joining our little army. Freya adjusted her preppy outfit. Glad to help if I can. I don't have any battle skills, but I can tend to anyone wounded. Rowan just nodded, his gray eyes inspecting the tree line as if deciphering an invisible code. Freya's healing abilities could be crucial, and Rowan's wind manipulation might give us an edge. But a nagging voice in the back of my mind wondered if it would be enough. We were up against two of the most powerful witches in Emberwick Crossing. The odds weren't exactly in our favor. An eerie chill crept over us as we approached the ancient redwood, a gnarled giant that seemed to pulse with dark power. The tree was adorned with intricate carvings of arcane symbols and mystical spells, each one seeming to vibrate with energy. Standing next to the tree were Archmage and Ingrid Nightspire, their presence adding to the ominous atmosphere. As the wind whipped through the forest, Archmage's long black hair swirled around her like a nest of serpents. These were the witches responsible for so much pain and suffering. The ones who'd orchestrated my parents' death. Anger bubbled up inside me, hot and fierce. I wanted to lash out, to unleash every spell I knew upon them. But I held back. Losing control now would be disastrous. "Ah, Sage Holland and her little band of rebels has arrived," Archmage said, her tone smooth, cold. Ingrid smirked beside her. "And you've brought friends." Their arrogance made my blood boil. Did they really think we were just some ragtag group of misfits? But what if we'd overlooked something? What if their powers were stronger than we'd anticipated? "Holy hell, you're annoying," I said, clenching my jaw. "Your bravado is misplaced." Ingrid scoffed with flippant indifference, eyeing us like we were nothing more than gnats. Her dismissive attitude only fueled my resolve. I'd show her just how misplaced her own confidence was. "Hello, Ingrid." Brad stepped forward with a confidence that made my heart skip. With Brad beside me, it gave me a burst of courage. We'd been through so much together, and his love meant everything to me. But a flicker of fear pinched my chest. What if something happened to him? To any of us? The thought of losing someone I cared about was almost paralyzing. I lifted my chin. "You won't get away with whatever twisted plan you've got." Archmage laughed, a sound devoid of any genuine amusement. "My twisted plans are simple. With the Echoing Locket, I will bend every magical being to my will. Then I shall become the ultimate authority in Emberwick Crossing." "Over my dead body," I said. "Very well," Ingrid said, almost bored. The battle erupted with a roar. Spells and curses collided in midair, bursts of multicolored energy crackling like fireworks. The ground trembled beneath us, the atmosphere charged with magic. Brad stood beside me, his hands shaping the air as he conjured barriers out of thin air. "Sage, focus on countering. I'll handle defense." Freya was a whirlwind of motion, darting between us and healing wounds as quickly as they formed. Ingrid smirked from the shadows, her hands weaving complex sigils to summon a horde of shadow beasts. A ball of dark energy hurtled toward Evie and Freya, only to be deflected by one of Brad's barriers. Ingrid, her eyes glowing with malevolence, hurled fireballs at the tree line, setting the forest ablaze as the sun dipped below the horizon. Evie grinned, her fingers twitching. "Time to cute IFY some baddies." She flicked her wrist, transforming an attacking shadow beast conjured by Archmage into a bewildered fluffy dog. Professor Elderwood stood a few paces away, wind swirling around him as if he were the calm within the storm. "Your tactics are futile," he declared, hurling gusts at Archmage. Archmage laughed, flicking a hand to dispel his wind effortlessly. "You call that a spell? Pathetic." She raised her hands, and dark tendrils snaked from her fingers towards the professor. Holy hell, this was not going according to plan. I'd hoped for a dramatic showdown, but this felt more like a magical food fight gone wrong. Cackling wickedly, Ingrid summoned thorny vines from the forest floor, ensnaring unwary combatants as the last rays of sunlight faded. I groaned, now we had evil plants to deal with. As if battling two power-hungry witches wasn't enough of a green-thumb challenge. Professor Rowan's expression hardened as he foresaw the attack just in time to counter with his own elemental magic. "You'll never take Emberwick Crossing." I had to admire the professor's gusto. Drawing on every fiber of my being, a powerful binding spell shimmered around Archmage momentarily before she shattered it with a mere flick of her wrist. "Damn." Ingrid laughed coldly, summoning more shadowy creatures with each movement of her hand. "Is that all you've got?" Archmage jeered. Brad's voice was urgent beside me. "We need to combine our strengths. Now." My boyfriend, ever the problem solver. If only we could build a magical fortress to keep these villains out. With a sinister grin, Ingrid conjured a swarm of shadowy bats, sending them to harass us. Oh joy, flying rodents of doom. Freya ducked as a bat swooped over her head, stepping closer to me. "Sage, try your spell creation, something new." "Something new?" "Sure, let me just pull a never-before-seen spell out of my witchy hat." No pressure. Evie threw another potion. And make it sparkle. I rolled my eyes. Leave it to Evie to request glitter in the middle of a magical showdown. Freya's hands glowed with protective energy as she shielded our group from incoming attacks. My thoughts raced through options. Then it hit me. An amalgamation spell combining our unique powers might do the trick. Chanting an incantation under my breath, symbols were drawn in the air. Ingrid's eyes blazed with malice as she hurled bolts of dark energy at our defensive line. Brad's architecture manipulation melded seamlessly with my creation power. A glowing pattern emerged between us, a swirling vortex pulling in unrestrained magical energy from everyone involved. Evie sang between potion throws, her movements fluid and unpredictable as she dodged enemy spells. Keep it steady, Professor Elderwood ordered, and paused his attacks long enough to lend wind energy to the vortex. Focusing intently, my hands wove intricate patterns to maintain the spell's stability. Archmage's smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second before she unleashed another barrage of dark magic at us. The vortex absorbed it like fuel for our combined spell. Now, releasing the energy we had harnessed in one explosive burst aimed directly at Archmage. The impact knocked Archmage back several feet, staggering but not defeated. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. The Dark Witch began chanting again, this time more intensely. Freya's hands glowed with healing magic as she tended to our wounds. Fall back, the professor commanded. Evie tossed a smoke bomb, creating a thick cloud of magical mist to cover our retreat. Ingrid circled the battlefield, her eyes scanning for weaknesses in our defenses. Agatha appeared out of nowhere, a blur of shadow and fur, and leaped at Archmage's face, claws extended. The sudden distraction was enough for us to regroup momentarily. Brad wiped sweat off his brow and turned to me. This won't hold forever. Breathlessly nodding, my eyes remained fixed on Agatha as she harassed Archmage like an avenging feline fury. But it bought us time. Evie readied another smoke bomb potion. Then Evie stepped forward. "Look out," she yelled. A tendril of shadow whipped toward me. It splintered against my hastily conjured barrier, showering me with sparks. Nice try. I launched a counterattack with a flick of my wrist. Your efforts are futile, Archmage taunted, her voice never losing its chilling composure. She parried my spell effortlessly, her own magic dark and suffocating. Brad now, I called. My boyfriend sprang forward, his hands weaving a complex pattern. The earth responded, roots and vines rising to bind Ingrid's ankles. Pitiful. Ingrid sneered, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of concern as she watched her sister struggle against the living restraints. Never underestimate a builder warlock. Brad was straining while he reinforced the binding spell. Professor, a little help if you please? I asked, dodging another volley of curses from Ingrid. Quite right, Sage, quite right. Elderwood unleashed a fresh rush of wind that turned the Dark Witch's spells awry. Evie, Brad, cover him. I shouted over the roar of magic clashing. Got it. They both cried in unison. Freya's healing aura pulsed around us, knitting together minor cuts and bruises. Freya, keep it up. Gasping, I felt the abrasion on my arm seal under her healing power. We can't let them break us. No way, Freya replied, her hands aglow with a soft verdant light that wove between us like threads of life itself. Professor Elderwood's wind magic whirled around us, creating a protective barrier of swirling leaves and branches. Evie, can you? But I didn't have to finish the sentence. My best friend was already lobbing another potion, this one bursting into blinding brilliance upon impact at Ingrid and Archmage. Ha! Take that! Evie cheered, her voice sounded with infectious bravado. Ingrid and Archmage hurled dark spells at our group, their malevolent energy crackling through the twilight. Agatha, shadow strike now. The command barked from my lips. My familiar leapt from the darkness, claws extended towards our foes with supernatural precision. Agatha's shadowy form slashed across Ingrid and Archmage, leaving them reeling and disoriented. Troublesome creatures, Ingrid hissed, swatting at Agatha with a spell that turned to smoke upon contact. Agatha snorted derisively. You haven't seen anything yet. Brad's builder magic conjured massive roots from the forest floor, ensnaring the evil witch's feet. Ingrid cackled maniacally, her hands glowing with dark magic as she prepared to strike again. Focus, everyone! Professor Elderwood's voice was strained. The warlock maneuvered the winds in a protective circle around us. Ingrid's dark magic crackled, threatening to break through our defenses. I gritted my teeth, searching for a solution. Any bright ideas, Sage? Evie called out, fumbling with another potion vial. I racked my brain. Working on it. Kinda hard to think with all this evil energy flying around. Perhaps a dash of chaos is in order, Agatha purred, her tail swishing mischievously. Pandemonium? We've got plenty already. Brad grunted, straining to maintain his root barrier. Professor Elderwood's voice cut through the din. Focus, Miss Holland. Your unconventional spellcraft may be our only hope. I nodded, drawing a deep breath. Right. Unconventional. That's me in a nutshell. Less nutshell, more action. Freya urged, her healing magic faltering under the onslaught. Archmage Nightspire's laughter echoed across the battlefield. Your pitiful resistance only delays the inevitable. Inevitable? I scoffed. The only thing inevitable here is your bad hair day. Ingrid snarled, hurling another volley of dark energy. Insolent witch. We'll crush you and your pathetic friends. Oh, touched a nerve, did we? Agatha taunted, melting into the shadows. Brad's voice strained with effort. Sage, whatever you're planning, do it fast. These roots won't hold forever. I closed my eyes, reaching deep within myself. The familiar tingle of magic coursed through my veins, building to a crescendo. Evie, I called out, I need your most ridiculous potion. The weirder, the better. My best friend's face lit up with a mischievous grin. One bottle of pure chaos coming right up. As Evie concocted her brew, I began to weave an intricate pattern in the air, my fingers trailing sparks of magic. What are you doing? Freya asked, her brow furrowed in concentration as she maintained her healing aura. Something stupid, I admitted. But hey, it might just work. Professor Elderwood's wind barrier faltered, his voice strained. Whatever you're planning, Miss Holland, I suggest you hurry. Archmage's voice dripped with contempt. Your pitiful tricks cannot save you now. Save the villainous monologue for your memoirs, sister dear, Ingrid hissed. Let's finish this. As the evil witches prepared another assault, Evie tossed me a swirling, multicolored vial. Here's your bubbly cocktail. I caught the potion and wove it into my spell, feeling the conflicting energies merge and twist. Brace yourselves, I shouted, unleashing the spell with a burst of wild magic. The air crackled with energy as my unconventional creation took form. A swirling vortex of color and light erupted between us and our foes, pulsing with chaotic power. Ingrid recoiled, her face a mask of confusion. What manner of trickery is this? Archmage's eyes narrowed. Whatever it is, destroy it. But as the dark witches launched their attacks, the vortex absorbed and twisted their magic, sending it ricocheting in unpredictable directions. Ha! Agatha cackled, materializing beside me. Now that's what I call a spell. Brad whooped with delight. Sage, you're a genius. An unpredictable genius, Freya added, a hint of worry in her voice. Professor Elderwood studied the swirling magic with fascination. Remarkable. Utterly reckless, but remarkable nonetheless. Evie bounced on her toes, clapping her hands. It's like a magical disco ball of doom. As the vortex grew, it began to affect our surroundings. Trees bent at impossible angles, rocks floated in midair, and the very ground beneath our feet seemed to ripple and shift. Sage? Brad called out, his voice tinged with concern. You can control this thing, right? I bit my lip, concentrating on maintaining the spell. Yeah. Ingrid and Archmage struggled against the chaotic energy, their own magic turning against them in unpredictable ways. This is impossible. Archmage roared, her carefully preserved spells unraveling before her eyes. Ingrid's precognition seemed to be going haywire, her eyes darting wildly as she saw 1,000 possible futures at once. Make it stop. Sorry, no refunds on karma, I said, channeling more energy into the vortex. Freya's healing magic pulsed erratically, causing flowers to sprout from the cracks in the ground. Sage, I think we might be overdoing it a bit. Nonsense. Evie cackled, tossing more potions into the fray. Let's see what happens when I add a little extra zing. As her concoctions mixed with the chaotic energy, the vortex began to spin faster, pulling everything towards its center. Miss Black, Professor Elderwood admonished, his wind magic struggling against the pull. This is not the time for experimentation. Au contraire, Professor. Agatha purred, her shadowy form stretching and twisting in the chaos. Brad grunted, using his construction magic to anchor us to the ground. Maybe we should dial it back a notch? I shook my head, my hair whipping wildly in the magical winds. No way. Indeed, Ingrid and Archmage were being drawn inexorably towards the center of the vortex, their powers useless against its pull. This cannot be. Archmage wailed, her carefully laid plans crumbling around her. Ingrid's voice was shrill with panic. Sister, do something. As they struggled, I felt a surge of triumph. We were winning. But then I noticed the trees around us starting to uproot, and the sky above twisting into impossible shapes. Guys? I called out, my confidence wavering. I think we might have a tiny problem. Freya's voice was strained. Oh. Before I could respond, the vortex pulsed with a blinding light, and everything went silent. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Archmage lifted the echoing locket around her neck and grinned at me. My blood ran cold. Muttering a spell while holding the amulet, Archmage's magic exploded outward and the vortex disintegrated. Professor, watch out! Brad yelled. Another surge of dark energy, blacker than the void, erupted from Archmage's outstretched hands, aimed straight for us. Elderwood, eyes wide, stepped in front of the blast to protect us. Rowan, no. Freya screamed. The explosion rocked the forest, ancient stones tumbling from the blast. Professor Elderwood's form was engulfed in the dark maelstrom. My heart lurched. Time seemed to fracture. My heart lurched. Time seemed to fracture. This couldn't be happening. Not Professor Elderwood. Now he was gone in an instant, swallowed by that inky darkness. We were alone now, facing two of the most powerful dark witches in existence. And they'd just taken out our strongest ally without breaking a sweat. Panic clawed at my throat, threatening to choke me. But beneath it, something else stirred. A spark of defiance, of rage. How dare they? How dare they waltz in here and destroy everything we held dear? First my parents, now Professor Elderwood. When would it end? I felt my magic roiling inside me, responding to my turmoil. It wanted out. It wanted justice. Or was it vengeance? In that moment, I wasn't sure I cared about the difference. The anger bubbling up inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. This wasn't me. I didn't lose control like this. Yet here I was, teetering on the edge of something dangerous and exhilarating. Professor. The word tore from my throat. At his death, I felt something inside of me snap free, instinctive, unbridled magic flooding my veins. The rush of power was intoxicating. It coursed through me like liquid fire, setting every nerve ending alight. I'd always known I was capable of powerful magic, but this was something else entirely. It was as if a dam had broken, releasing years of pent-up potential in one cataclysmic surge. Evie and Brad stood frozen in shock while Freya sobbed uncontrollably, her hands covering her face. The protective instinct that had always been a part of me roared to life, demanding action. Ingrid's smirk faltered. Sage thinks she can? Shut up. The rage in my voice startled even myself. For a brief moment, I wondered if this was how villains were born, in a moment of unchecked anger and power. But no, I reminded myself. I wasn't like them. I was fighting for something greater than myself. Levitating off the ground, power surged through every cell, alight with 7th-level magic. An ethereal glow enveloped my body as the air crackled with raw energy, leaves and debris swirling around in a vortex of unleashed power. The sensation of floating was surreal. I felt weightless, untethered from the physical world. Was this what true power felt like? It was tempting, oh so tempting, to lose myself in it completely. Knowing I should have been terrified, an overwhelming need to end this and protect what was left of my world surged through me. Wild and untamed magic filled every corner of my being, threatening to tear me apart from the inside. Holding on, channeling and shaping it became my focus. This gift, this curse, was ready to be put to use. I'd always been the responsible one, the level-headed witch who thought things through. But now I was chaos incarnate, a force of nature barely contained in human form. For the first time in my life, I understood why some witches went dark. The allure of such unbridled magic was nearly impossible to resist. "End this, sage," Agatha said. Agatha's voice cut through the haze of power. "Yes, end this. That's exactly what I intended to do." My familiar had seen the rise and fall of countless witches. Was I destined to be just another cautionary tale? For me, this wasn't about revenge or power. It was about protection, about safeguarding the future of Emberwick Crossing. I'd been given this power for a reason, and I intended to use it wisely. I looked at Archmage and Ingrid, really looked at them. They thought they were invincible, that their dark magic made them unstoppable. But I saw the truth. They were scared. Scared of change, scared of losing their grip on power. And now, they were scared of me. And I liked it. Then I saw them for what they truly were, not all powerful beings, but scared, desperate individuals clinging to outdated ideals. It was almost pitiful. Almost. But then I remembered all the pain they'd caused, all the lives they'd ruined, and my resolve hardened. For my parents, for Brad, for Evie, for all of Emberwick Crossing. This was our stand. A smile spread across my face. Archmage. Ingrid. My voice ringing clear as I addressed the two dark witches. Your night ends here. Archmage sneered and she backed up. Brave words, you little bitch. Her insult barely registered. What mattered was the fear in her eyes, the slight tremor in her voice. She knew, just as I did, that everything was about to change. Good. Let them be afraid. Let them feel a fraction of the terror they'd inflicted on others. I'd make them regret ever setting foot in Emberwick Crossing. A dark part of me relished their fear. It was a heady feeling, knowing I held their fate in my hands. But I couldn't let that darkness consume me. I was better than that. I had to be. With a cry that blended grief with fury, a torrent of pure energy erupted. Brilliant azure flames burst forth, engulfing the forest in an eerie glow. The magical inferno surged towards Ingrid and Archmage, its tendrils lashing out like vengeful spirits. The spell was unlike anything I'd ever cast before. It was beautiful and terrifying, a manifestation of every emotion I'd bottled up over the years. Grief for my parents, anger at the injustice, hope for a better future, all of it poured into this single devastating attack. Archmage sprinted behind the massive tree to hide while Ingrid took the full force of the magic, her screams echoing through the forest. Brad, cover me. Sensing him step closer, his builder strength lent solidity to my casting. Anything for you, he affirmed, his confidence lending solidity to my casting. Agatha jumped into the tree and sat on a branch overlooking us. I glanced at my best friend. Evie, potions. She was already sending swirls of colored mist to augment the potency of the spell. Go, Sage. Evie exclaimed with tears glistened in her eyes. Freya backed up out of harm's way. With a final burst of energy, the spell struck true, and Ingrid's body convulsed in agony. Her piercing scream echoed through the darkness. As her lifeline to this world was severed, she collapsed to the ground in a crumpled heap, her once strong and imposing figure now reduced to a lifeless shell. Blood oozed from her wounds, staining the ground beneath her as her breaths came in ragged gasps. The sight of Ingrid's broken body filled me with a mixture of satisfaction and horror. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? But as I watched the life drain from her, I wondered if I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. I'd taken a life. Justified or not, that was a burden I'd carry forever. But my magic was still pulsing and darkening around us. Then, with a deafening crack, reality itself seemed to splinter. The magic world collapsed in on itself, taking trees and foliage with it. Instead of disappearing, it began to expand outward, warping everything it touched. "What's happening?" Brad shouted over the roar of magic gone wild. Agatha's voice was grim. "It appears Sage torn a hole in the fabric of reality itself." Chapter 8. My eyes widened. Oops. I frantically tried to rein in the spell, but it was like trying to catch smoke with my bare hands. "I can't control it." Agatha huffed from above us in the tree. "Well, this is a fine mess you've gotten us into, Sage. Any brilliant ideas for getting us out?" As the chaos spread, I realized with growing horror that we might have just made things infinitely worse. "Don't suppose anyone knows how to patch a hole in reality?" I asked weakly, watching as the world around us began to unravel. Brad's jaw dropped. "Patch a hole in reality? Sure, let me just grab my cosmic sewing kit." I shot him a hard look. Not helping Brad. My warping magic continued to spread, twisting trees into impossible shapes and tearing chunks of plants from the ground. Leaves swirled in a whirl of disorderly energy, their edges glowing an eerie purple. Evie stumbled forward, her hands raised. "Maybe we can contain it? Like, create a magical barrier?" "Worth a shot." I nodded, focusing my energy. Except when I tried to form a shield, the wild magic latched onto my new spell, warping it into something unrecognizable. "Okay, scratch that idea. I still don't have full control over my 7th level magic yet." "Obviously." Agatha yawned from her perch. "This is a fine mess, and I'm hungry." I gritted my teeth. "If you've got any helpful suggestions, I'm all ears." The cat spirit yawned again. "I'd rather watch the show, thanks. It's not every day you get to see reality unravel." Brad pressed his palms to the ground, his face scrunched in concentration. The earth rumbled, and I thought he might be able to counteract my magic. The twisted magic only absorbed his attempts, creating a nightmarish landscape of impossible architecture. "Well, that's unsettling." He stood, wiping sweat from his brow. Freya pushed through the group. "We need to ground the energy. Sage, your power started this. It needs to end it too." I blinked at her. "How exactly am I supposed to do that?" She grabbed my hands. "Focus. Feel the magic flowing through you. It's part of you, not separate. You control it, not the other way around." I closed my eyes, trying to concentrate with my crazy magic swirling around us. My magic vibrated within me, wild and untamed. I focused, and sensed the familiar heat of my own power beneath the maelstrom. "That's it," Freya encouraged. "Now, imagine roots growing from your feet, anchoring you to the earth." I did as she said, picturing thick, gnarled roots spreading from my toes and burrowing deep into the soil. The image steadied me, and I felt a subtle shift in the magic's flow. Brad grunted. Guys? Not to rush you, but we've got company." My eyes snapped open to see mysterious figures emerging from the warped landscape. Must be Archmage's magical tricks. The creatures were vaguely humanoid and ugly. Evie let out a nervous laugh. Like this situation wasn't fun enough already. I struggled to maintain my concentration. "A little help here?" Brad nodded, his hands glowing with power. "On it." He thrust his palms forward, and chunks of plants rose to form a protective wall around us. Evie fumbled in her bag, pulling out a handful of vials. "Time to see if these work on whatever the heck those things are." She hurled the potions at the approaching creatures. Where the potions struck, the creatures momentarily solidified into rabbits? Seriously? I shook my head. Evie shrugged. Hey, it worked. Sort of. The rabbit creatures twitched their noses before melting back into their previous forms. They pressed against Brad's barrier, their touch causing the thick underbrush and vines to bend and crack. Any time now, Sage. Brad grunted, struggling to maintain the wall. I redoubled my efforts, channeling my power through the imaginary roots. My ferocious magic resisted, pushing back against my attempts to control it. It was like trying to redirect a river with my bare hands. It's not working. I gasped, my frustration building. Freya squeezed my hands tighter. Don't fight it. Work with it. The magic is an extension of you, remember? I took a deep breath, rearranging my approach. Instead of trying to force the magic into submission, I opened myself to it. The power surged through me, no longer feeling foreign and chaotic, but subdued and alive. That's it. Freya exclaimed. Now guide it back to where it belongs. With newfound clarity, I could sense the terror in reality. It was like a gaping wound in the fabric of the world, exposed and painful. Slowly, carefully, I began to weave the magic back together, mending the tear strand by strand. The murky creatures let out unearthly wails when their connection to our world was severed. They dissipated like mist in the morning sun, leaving behind only a faint chill in the air. As the last of my magic settled, the forest around us gradually returned to normal. Twisted trees straightened, floating chunks of earth settled back into place, and the eerie purple glow faded from the leaves. I sagged against Freya, exhaustion hitting me. Did it work? She nodded, a smile on her face. You did it, Sage. The tear is sealed. Brad lowered his hands, the stone wall crumbling back into the earth. Nice job, babe. Though maybe next time, let's stick to smaller spells? You know, ones that don't threaten to unravel the universe. I managed a weak chuckle. Where's the fun in that? Evie plopped down beside me, her hair a tangled mess. Well, that was super duper intense. Anyone else feel like we just ran a magical marathon? Agatha meowed from her branch. I found it quite entertaining. Though I do think you missed your calling as a magician, Evie. Those rabbit tricks were something else. Evie rolled her eyes. Oh, ha ha. Next time, you can be on creepy creature duty. As the adrenaline faded, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. My gaze drifted to Ingrid's still, lifeless form. Brad followed my line of sight, his expression softening. Hey, you okay? I swallowed hard. I don't know. I killed someone, Brad. And then I nearly destroyed reality. That's a lot to process. Freya placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. What happened with Ingrid was self-defense, Sage. And as for the rest, well, we all make mistakes. The important thing is that you fixed it. Yeah, Evie said. Plus, now we know what not to do if we ever face off against another evil witch. No reality warping spells. Brad helped me to my feet. Now we need to deal with her. He nodded towards Archmage still hiding behind the tree. I nodded, trying to push aside my tumultuous emotions. There would be time to process everything later. Agatha leapt down from her perch, landing gracefully beside us. Well, as thrilling as this little adventure has been, I suggest we move quickly. Who knows what other nasty surprises Archmage might have in store for us. Archmage peeked from around the tree, her cold facade cracking as she realized the magnitude of what had transpired. Her sister was dead. When I locked eyes with Archmage, I saw something I never expected: vulnerability. For a brief second, she wasn't the all-powerful witch who'd terrorized Emberwick Crossing. She was just a woman who'd lost her sister. And I was the one responsible. The moment of vulnerability vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by an icy glare. Archmage's rage seemed to radiate from her like heat from a flame, distorting the air around us. You'll pay for killing my sister, you bitch. Archmage hissed through gritted teeth. She thrust her hand forward, sending a wave of dark energy that knocked the breath out of me. Evie, distract her, I yelled. Got it, Sage? Evie flung a concoction of her own creation. A sparkling mist enveloped Archmage, causing her to cough and sputter, her concentration broken. Channeling my new 7th level magic, I summoned a torrent of pure, blinding light that surged towards Archmage, its power overwhelming her dark energy and enveloping her in a cocoon of radiant force. Archmage's screams echoed through the forest as the blinding light enveloped her, drowning out the sounds of the birds settling down for the night. The sheer power of my magic tore through her defenses, the dark energy around her disintegrating into nothingness. Her form flickered, struggling against the overwhelming force, but she was no match for the raw, unbridled power I now wielded. Sage, keep it up, Brad shouted from behind me. I focused every ounce of my willpower into maintaining the spell, feeling the magic surge through my veins like liquid fire. The forest around us seemed to hold its breath, the trees and underbrush bathed in the ethereal glow of the magical battle. Archmage's figure finally collapsed, her energy spent and her body crumpling to the ground. The radiant light dissipated, leaving behind a stillness that felt almost surreal. I lowered my hands, breathing heavily. Evie rushed to my side, her eyes wide with awe and concern. Sage, are you okay? I nodded, still trying to catch my breath. Yeah, I'm okay. Is it over? Brad stepped forward, his eyes locked on Archmage's motionless form. I think so. But we need to make sure. We cautiously approached Archmage, the air around her still crackling with residual energy. I could see the rise and fall of her chest, indicating she was still alive, but barely. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, she looked up at me with a mixture of hatred and sorrow. You think you've won, she whispered, her voice weak and rasping. This isn't over. My plans, they will live on. No, they won't. Not while I'm protecting this town, I said firmly. Brad, keep her contained. I sensed the power thrumming within him. My boyfriend raised his hands and the earth responded, stone shackles emerging to hold Archmage's feet firm. Nearby, Freya knelt beside an injured Evie, her hands glowing with a soft, healing light as she tended to her wounds with her healer magic. Agatha, with me, I said. We need to get that locket from around her skinny neck. Without hesitation, my feline familiar leapt into action. Her shadowy tendrils reached out, snaking around Archmage and reinforcing every restraint. Damn you all, Archmage spat, struggling against the combined might of our magic. But it was no use because this time we had her. Cautiously approaching, I was ready to harness every ounce of my 7th level magic to finish what we'd started. I extended my hand, palm outstretched, and Archmage's eyes widened as she felt her own power waning. With a final push of my will, I stripped her of the Echoing Locket, severing her connection to its dark magic. The Dark Witch slumped, defeated, her menace reduced to nothing more than a bitter memory. My friends rallied around me, their faces a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Is it over? Evie asked, her voice both hopeful and weary. Almost, I replied, turning my attention to the locket now resting in my palm. The intricate silver piece seemed to pulse with malevolence, begging to be used, to corrupt. Destroy it, Sage, Freya urged. It's the only way. I knew she was right, but the locket's power called to me, promising strength beyond measure. Meow. Agatha's voice cut through my hesitation. Young witch, don't even think about it. I met her yellow gaze, finding resolve within those wise old eyes. I need your help, Agatha. Familiar and witch, I said. My cat nodded, her form blurring when she tapped into her shadow magic. Goodbye, unholy darkness, I whispered, channeling all of my magic into the locket. Agatha's power intertwined with mine, shadows and light spiraling toward the cursed object. There was a thundering crack. The locket splintered into pieces, each shard evaporating before it could touch the ground. The forest seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the oppressive presence of Archmage's ambition dissipating like fog. The sudden absence of the locket's power left me dizzy. For a moment, I couldn't quite believe it was over. All our struggles, all our fears, gone in an instant. But the cost. Professor Elderwood's face flashed in my mind, and my throat tightened. We did it. Evie squealed, throwing her arms around me. We really did it. An era ends and hope is reborn. Freya sighed. Hope. Such a small word for such a big concept. I wondered if I was ready for it, after everything we'd been through. Looks like we're finally free. Brad placed a gentle kiss on my forehead. I leaned into Brad's touch, grateful for his steady presence. Then I smiled, looking at the faces of my friends. They'd been through hell with me, stood by me when the world seemed to crumble. My chest swelled with affection and gratitude. Heavy footfalls pounded through the forest, and we all turned to see what was headed our way. My heart leapt into my throat. After everything, was there more danger? Whoa, look sharp, everyone. Brad called out, his voice a mix of warning and wonder. A group clad in midnight robes emerged from the tree line, their cloaks embroidered with silver sigils that glinted in the fading light. They moved with purpose, an air of authority swirling around them like mist. Who were these people? Friends or foes? After Archmage's betrayal, I wasn't sure I could trust anyone new. Brad, who are they? I asked, my hand reaching for a power I hoped I wouldn't need to summon again. Those are the arbiters of balance, he explained, his tone signaling respect and caution. My dad mentioned them, new enforcers the council put together after our last meeting. Regulators of magic, here to maintain order, Freya said, her voice laced with awe. Good guys. The arbiter's leader stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Archmage, who lay bound and powerless at our feet. I held my breath, torn between hope and fear. Would they understand what we'd done? Or would they see us as vigilantes, to be punished alongside Archmage? Archmage, he intoned, his voice as smooth and unyielding as obsidian. For your crimes against the magical community, you will be taken into custody. Phew. They weren't here for us. We'd done the right thing, and they recognized it. The knot in my chest began to loosen. Justice, Agatha hissed beside me, served cold and late but served nonetheless. I glanced at my familiar, seeing the satisfaction in her feline eyes. Yes, the arbiter agreed with a nod. As they levitated Archmage away, the relief that flooded through me was tinged with a bittersweet ache. Professor Elderwood's sacrifice hung over us like a shadow. The arbiters of balance also took the bodies of the professor and the High Witch. They didn't question us or demand answers. They just left as quickly as they'd appeared. Poor professor. Evie's voice caught. We'll remember him, always, I said. His memory will live on in every spell we cast, Freya added softly, her compassionate gaze meeting mine. Brad wrapped an arm around me. Let's go home. We walked back toward Emberwick Crossing, the town now safe from the threat that had loomed over it. Never easy, is it? Agatha mused, brushing against my leg. Never, I replied. But always worth it. I suppose. Now can we eat? She asked. Everyone laughed, and we continued onward, a patchwork family held together by love, loss, and the magic that bound us. Chapter 9. Epilogue. I cradled our newborn, a swaddle of joy with Brad's blue eyes and my wild hair. 5 years had flown by like a leaf on the Emberwick Crossing wind, but here we were, standing at the precipice of a new era. Brad and I had gotten married last year, amongst our friends and family. He had torn down both of our houses and rebuilt a new home on our combined properties, big enough for our new family. Holy hell, who would have thought I'd be here? From battling supernatural uprisings, to magical interior design, to changing diapers. Talk about a career change. Look at her. Brad leaned in close enough for his breath to warm my ear. She's perfect, Sage. Absolutely adorable. I smiled at our daughter's gentle coos. The door to the hospital room opened, and in swept Freya, Evie, and Agatha. I wondered if they'd brought any magical baby gifts. A self-rocking cradle would be nice. Evie, with her black hair bouncing around her shoulders, moved toward the hospital bed. Let me see the newest witchling of Emberwick. Easy there. I laughed, adjusting the baby in my arms as Evie peered over my shoulder. You'll have your turn just after Freya and Agatha. I mentally prepared a shield spell, just in case Evie's excitement caused any accidental potion spills. Turning my newborn into a bunny wouldn't be funny. Freya edged in beside Evie, her gaze softening when she laid eyes on the little one. Oh, she's got such a strong aura already. Brad stayed by my side, his hand on my shoulder. My cat hopped up onto the bed and inched closer. Out of the way, you two. Agatha's yellow stare met mine, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Young witch, she said, her voice a purring growl, you've done well. Coming from Agatha, that was practically a standing ovation. I half expected her to break into a cat rendition of Circle of Life. Brad grinned. Thanks, Agatha. Evie stretched her hands out. May I? Of course. I carefully passed my daughter into her arms. Evie cradled the baby with utmost gentleness. Looks like she could turn any beast into a bunny with a single giggle. Brad squeezed my shoulders. Let's hope she only uses that power for good. Evie flashed a mischievous grin. Or for epic prank wars. Everyone's laughter mingled with the baby's gurgles. I gestured toward the window where Emberwick Crossing basked under the bright sun. Hey, it's been 5 years and just look at us now. From supernatural showdowns to domestic bliss. If someone had told me this would be my life 5 years ago, I'd have checked them for a confusion curse. Brad mimed raising a glass. Here's to a brighter future. Freya intertwined her fingers with Evie's. Unity. Evie gazed adoringly at the baby. Hope. I smiled warmly. And new beginnings. Brad leaned down to kiss our daughter's forehead. As I watched my little family, both magical and mundane, I couldn't help but think, bring on the dirty diapers and midnight feedings. After facing down dark witches and supernatural uprisings, how hard could parenthood really be? Parenthood, the ultimate boss battle. At least this time, I wouldn't need to invent a spell to change diapers, or would I? Agatha's tail twitched. New beginnings? More like new headaches. Just wait until she starts levitating her toys. I giggled. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Agatha. Always here to keep it real, she purred, stretching lazily across the foot of the bed. Freya stepped closer, her hands glowing softly. May I perform a blessing? It's a tradition among healers. Of course, Brad and I said in unison. As Freya began her incantation, Evie bounced on her toes. Ooh, I have something too. She rummaged in her bag, pulling out a small vial. A protection potion. Totally baby safe, I promise. Brad raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Remember the time you tried to cure my cold? Evie rolled her eyes. That was one time. And the yak fur eventually fell out. Brad frowned, running a hand through his hair as if checking it was still there. I stifled a laugh. It's okay, Evie. We trust you. Ah, the joys of magical mishaps. At least yak fur was a step up from last year, when Evie accidentally turned my cat into a throw pillow. Poor Agatha still refuses to sit on the couch. Freya finished her blessing, a soft golden glow surrounding the baby. There. A little extra magical fortification. Brad sighed. I think we should probably start baby-proofing the house. Magical and otherwise. I groaned. Don't remind me. We'll need anti-levitation wards on all the furniture. And flame retardant everything, Evie said helpfully. Agatha snorted. Don't forget soundproofing spells. Trust me, you'll need them. Brad laughed. Always the optimist, aren't you, Agatha? Realist, she corrected, licking a paw. Someone has to be. Freya smiled softly. Have you decided on a name yet? Brad and I exchanged glances. We're still debating, I admitted. Naming a magical baby felt like trying to pick the perfect spell ingredient. One wrong choice, and you might end up with an exploding cauldron instead of a love potion. How about Morgana? Evie suggested. Osiris. Or Hecate. We're not naming our daughter after ancient witches, I said firmly. Brad nodded. We want something more normal and modern. What about Aurora? Freya suggested. It's magical without being too on the nose. I considered it. That's not bad, actually. Aurora Adams, Brad tested it out. I like it. Evie beamed. It's perfect. Little Aurora, the newest witch of Emberwick. The baby, Aurora, let out a tiny sneeze. A shower of sparks erupted from her nose, briefly illuminating the room. We all froze for a moment, then burst into laughter. Well, I said, I guess that settles it. Aurora it is. Brad leaned in to kiss my cheek. Our little sparkler. Agatha's tail swished. Great. Now we'll have to fireproof the nursery too. Evie clapped. Oh. I can brew a flame-resistant paint. It'll be my gift to you. Freya shook her head, smiling. I'll bring some healing balm just in case. I laughed. What would we do without you all? Undoubtedly have a lot fewer magical mishaps and a lot more boring dinner parties. Probably have a much quieter life, Agatha mumbled. Brad grinned. But where's the fun in that? Aurora gurgled, a tiny spark dancing on her fingertip. Parenthood might just be the wildest adventure yet. I smiled down at her. Welcome to the family, little one. It's a bit crazy, but you'll get used to it. Or go mad trying. Agatha made herself comfortable beside me on the bed. Evie waved her hands in the air. Oh. We should have a naming ceremony. I'll bring the fireworks. Brad and I exchanged alarmed glances. I gazed at Aurora, marveling at how this tiny human had already wrapped us all around her little finger. She was going to grow up surrounded by love, laughter, and maybe a few magical mishaps. Poor kid didn't stand a chance of having a normal childhood, but then again, normal was overrated. Maybe we'll skip the fireworks, I said hastily. Evie pouted. Fine. Sparklers. How about nice, safe, non-flammable balloons? Freya suggested diplomatically. Thankfully, Freya was the voice of reason. I made a mental note to buy her a world's most sensible witch mug for her birthday. Maybe with a built-in spell to keep her tea at the perfect temperature. Evie brightened. Ooh, I can enchant them to change colors. I shook my head, laughing. You're all impossible. And yes, but in the best way possible. Brad squeezed my hand. But you love us anyway. His touch sent a surge of warmth through me, with a side of heart fluttering and the strong urge to create fireworks of our own. Yep, I sure do, I admitted. Aurora yawned, her tiny fist curling around Brad's finger. My heart melted faster than a snowman in July. How could something so small make me feel so big? Like I could conquer the world, or at least master the art of diaper changing, without accidentally summoning a plague of locusts. Freya smiled softly. I think Aurora's ready for a nap. Join the club, Agatha murmured, already half asleep at the foot of the bed. I wondered if her previous life as a witch had involved professional napping. If so, she was certainly keeping her skills sharp. As my friends gathered around, cooing over Aurora's sleeping form, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This was my family, quirky, magical, and absolutely perfect. The end.